Hello, dear friends. So glad you could join us at the Fanfic Club. Today's narrative adventure is titled, What If Gringotts' Inheritance Test at age 11 Revealed Harry owned 15 ancient houses and Dumbledore had stolen 2 million galleons. We put our heart into every story we share. If you appreciate our work, showing some love with a like and subscribe would make our day. The story begins now. Chapter 1, Blood and Gold. The gleaming marble floors of Gringotts' Wizarding Bank seemed to stretch endlessly before Harry as he followed Hagrid through the imposing entryway. Despite the half-giant's reassuring presence, Harry couldn't help but feel small beneath the vaulted ceiling where goblins peered down at him from high desks with calculating eyes. "Never mess with goblins, Harry," Hagrid muttered as they approached the main counter. "Clever as they come, goblins, but not the most forgiving of creatures." Harry nodded, taking in the strange sights and sounds of his first magical institution. Just a week ago, he'd been sleeping in a cupboard under the stairs. Now he was about to access a vault his parents had apparently left him. The whiplash of it all made his head spin. The goblin at the counter barely acknowledged their presence, continuing to weigh rubies the size of eggs on a brass scale. "Mr. Harry Potter wishes to make a withdrawal," Hagrid announced, his voice echoing more loudly than seemed necessary in the cavernous hall. The goblin looked up, his gaze lingering on Harry's forehead where the lightning scar peeked through his unruly hair. Something shifted in the creature's expression, too quick for Harry to interpret. "Does Mr. Potter have his key?" the goblin asked, setting down his scales. Hagrid patted his numerous pockets, muttering under his breath. "Got it here somewhere. Ah. Here it is." He produced a tiny golden key from an inside pocket. The goblin took it, examining it closely. "This appears to be in order." His long fingers turned the key over. "However," he added, his voice dropping to a tone that made Harry lean forward instinctively, "as this is Mr. Potter's first visit since his parents' passing, bank policy requires an inheritance verification." Hagrid frowned. "Dumbledore didn't mention nothing about that." The goblin's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "It is standard procedure for orphaned heirs of old families upon their first visit after reaching magical awareness." His gaze fixed on Harry. "Especially for the last scion of House Potter." Something about the goblin's tone made Harry straighten his shoulders. "What does that involve?" he asked, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "A simple blood test, Mr. Potter. It confirms your identity and reveals any inheritances or entitlements that may have activated upon your 11th birthday." The goblin gestured to a younger goblin nearby. "Griphook will take you to a private testing room. Your escort may accompany you or wait here." Hagrid shifted uncomfortably. "I've got some other Hogwarts business anyway." "Secret business." He patted the pocket of his coat meaningfully. "You'll be all right with the goblins for a bit, won't ya, Harry?" Before Harry could properly respond, Hagrid had placed his vault key in Harry's palm and was already lumbering toward another counter, leaving Harry alone with Griphook. "This way, Mr. Potter," said Griphook, gesturing toward a corridor of polished stone. The testing room was small but elegant, with marble walls inlaid with veins of what looked like real gold. A single wooden desk dominated the center, behind which sat an ancient-looking goblin whose wrinkled face bore a web of scars. "Bloodfong will conduct your inheritance test," Griphook explained before departing with a bow that seemed deeper than those he'd offered anyone else. Harry approached the desk cautiously. "Hello, sir." Bloodfong looked up, his dark eyes assessing. "Mr. Potter. I have waited many years for this meeting." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please, be seated." As Harry sat, the goblin produced an ornate silver dagger and a piece of parchment that seemed to shimmer faintly in the lamplight. 3 drops of blood on the parchment will suffice," Bloodfong explained. "The magic will do the rest." Harry hesitated only briefly before accepting the dagger. The blade was surprisingly warm to the touch, almost comforting. With a quick motion, he pricked his finger and allowed 3 drops of blood to fall onto the center of the parchment. The blood seemed to sink into the material, disappearing entirely. Now we wait, said Bloodfang, taking the dagger back. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, like invisible hands were writing on the page, crimson lines began to spread across the parchment, forming words, names, and connecting branches that reminded Harry of the family trees he'd seen in history books at school. Bloodfang's eyes widened, the first genuine surprise Harry had seen on a goblin's face. The parchment continued to fill, spreading beyond its original dimensions as it magically expanded to accommodate the growing text. Extraordinary, Bloodfang muttered. I had suspected, but this. What is it? Harry leaned forward, trying to decipher the upside-down text. Is something wrong with me? Wrong? No, Mr. Potter. But it appears your magical heritage is far more complex than anyone anticipated. Bloodfang turned the parchment around so Harry could read it properly. You are, as expected, the heir to the ancient and noble house of Potter. But that, it seems, is merely the beginning. Harry stared at the document, his heart pounding as he tried to make sense of the elaborate family tree that had materialized. At the bottom was his name, Harry James Potter, written in bold crimson letters. Above it, James Fleamont Potter and Lily Evans Potter. But from there, the tree expanded outward and upward in dizzying complexity. I don't understand, Harry said, tracing a particularly ornate branch with his finger. What does all this mean? It means, Mr. Potter, that through various marriages, magical adoptions, and blood rituals performed by your ancestors over centuries, you are the heir to 15 ancient magical houses. The room seemed to spin around Harry. 15. That can't be right. I'm just Harry. Bloodfang's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. There is no just about it, Mr. Potter. According to this test, you hold claim to House Potter, House Peveril, House Gryffindor, House Slytherin by conquest, House Black through your grandmother, House Ravenclaw through your mother's line, though that was previously unknown, House Emrys, House Lefay, House Pendragon. He continued listing names that meant nothing to Harry but seemed to impress Bloodfang more with each pronouncement. But that's impossible, Harry interrupted. My mother was Muggle-born. How could she be descended from Ravenclaw? Magic often finds ways to reassert itself, Mr. Potter. It's not uncommon for supposedly Muggle-born witches and wizards to actually be descended from squib lines that diverged from magical families generations ago. Your mother's ancestry appears to trace back to a squib daughter of the Ravenclaw line who married into a Muggle family in the 1600s. Harry's head was spinning. What does all this mean for me? Practically speaking, it means, Mr. Potter, that you are potentially one of the wealthiest and most politically powerful young wizards in Britain. Bloodfang's expression darkened as his finger traced further down the parchment. It also means that someone has been taking advantage of your ignorance. Harry's eyes followed the goblin's gnarled finger to a section labeled, Financial Discrepancies. His stomach dropped as he read, Unauthorized withdrawals from Potter Family Vault, 1981 to 1991, 1,746,320 galleons to APWB Dumbledore, Personal Vault, 1981 to 1991, 280,000 galleons to Order of the Phoenix Vault, controlled by APWB Dumbledore, 1981 to 1991, 120,000 galleons to Vernon and Petunia Dursley, Muggle Bank conversion, the Dursleys were being paid to keep me? Harry's voice cracked with disbelief. They always said I was a burden, that they took me in out of charity. It appears they were compensated quite handsomely, Bloodfang replied, his voice heavy with distaste. 10,000 galleons annually, converted to Muggle currency. That's approximately 50,000 Muggle pounds per year. Harry felt sick. The threadbare hand-me-downs, the cupboard under the stairs, the constant complaints about how much he cost them to feed, all while they were receiving a small fortune for his care. But even that betrayal paled next to the larger figure on the page. And Dumbledore? He took over 1.5 million galleons from my vault. How is that possible? Who authorized that? Albus Dumbledore appointed himself as your magical guardian shortly after your parents' death, Blood Fong explained, his tone carefully neutral though his eyes flashed with something darker. As magical guardian, he had limited access to your trust vault for expenses related to your upbringing. However, he appears to have exceeded his authority considerably. My magical guardian, Harry repeated, the unfamiliar term tasting bitter. And no one questioned this. The wizarding world was in chaos after the fall of the Dark Lord. Many normal procedures were abbreviated. And Dumbledore's reputation made him seem an obvious choice. Blood Fong hesitated. However, there is a more troubling aspect. Your parents' will was sealed by the Wizengamot at Dumbledore's request. We have a copy in our records, but legally could not execute it nor inform you of its contents. The betrayal cut deeper with each revelation. Can I see it now? Blood Fong nodded, pulling another parchment from a drawer in his desk. As you have undergone the inheritance test and claimed your status as heir, certain restrictions no longer apply. Harry took the document with trembling hands, scanning through formal legal language until he reached a section that made his heart stop. Under no circumstances is Harry to be placed with my sister Petunia Dursley and her husband. They despise magic and would be unsuitable guardians for a magical child. Should anything happen to both of us, Harry's guardianship should pass to the following individuals in order: Sirius Black, sworn godfather, Alice and Frank Longbottom, Minerva McGonagall, Amelia Bones, who is Sirius Black. And why wasn't I placed with any of these people? Harry demanded, anger beginning to replace the shock. Sirius Black is currently in Azkaban, the wizarding prison, for betraying your parents to Voldemort and murdering 12 Muggles, Blood Fong said bluntly. The Longbottoms were attacked shortly after your parents and have been in St. Mungo's Hospital ever since. As for why McGonagall or Bones wasn't consulted. He spread his hands. That would be a question for Albus Dumbledore. Harry sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything. Finally, he looked up at Blood Fong. What can I do about all this? Can I get the money back? Can I fire Dumbledore as my guardian? A slow, sharp-toothed smile spread across Bloodfang's face. That, Mr. Potter, is where things become interesting. Your inheritance test changes everything. As the recognized heir to multiple ancient and noble houses, you are entitled to claim emancipation under wizarding law. Emancipation? You mean, being treated legally as an adult? In certain matters, yes. You would still be subject to educational requirements and age restrictions on some magical activities, but you would control your own finances and make your own living arrangements. No magical guardian would have authority over you. Hope flickered in Harry's chest for the first time since the conversation began. And the stolen money? As an emancipated heir, you could authorize Gringotts to conduct a full audit and recovery investigation. We can freeze the withdrawals immediately and begin the process of reclaiming misappropriated funds. Bloodfang's voice dropped to a near whisper. The nation would be, particularly motivated to assist in such matters. We do not look kindly upon theft, especially when it involves our most ancient vaults. Harry considered this carefully. Everything was happening so fast, and every new piece of information seemed to remake his world entirely. The Dursleys had been paid to mistreat him. Dumbledore, the supposedly great wizard Hagrid revered, had stolen millions from him and deliberately placed him with family his parents had explicitly forbidden. And now he wasn't just Harry Potter, the boy who lived. He was the heir to 15 ancient houses with all the wealth and responsibility that entailed. If I do this, Harry said slowly, if I claim emancipation and start these investigations, Dumbledore will know immediately, won't he? Indeed. Such actions would not go unnoticed. Harry remembered Hagrid's awe when speaking of the headmaster, how everyone in the Leaky Cauldron had revered the man. Taking on someone so powerful would be dangerous, especially before he knew anything about the magical world. I need time, Harry decided. I need to learn more before I confront someone like Dumbledore openly. Is there any way to start the process quietly? Blood Fong studied him with newfound respect. Caution is wise when facing a wizard of Dumbledore's caliber. There are ways to proceed more discreetly. He pulled a fresh piece of parchment from his desk. We can file the emancipation claim but delay its public processing. We can immediately halt further withdrawals by claiming a standard security review of orphaned accounts, a procedure common enough to raise no immediate alarms. And the audit? The recovery of what was taken. That can begin internally while the paperwork remains in a bureaucratic limbo of sorts. By the time Dumbledore realizes what's happening, we will have secured enough evidence to proceed with formal charges regardless of his political influence. Harry nodded slowly. That sounds good. But I'll need to learn, about my family, these houses I'm supposedly heir to, wizarding laws, all of it. I know nothing. Gringotts can provide certain educational materials regarding your financial and legal position, Bloodfong offered. For a fee, of course. Of course, Harry echoed, a small smile touching his lips for the first time. Take it from my vaults. I want to know everything. Very wise, Mr. Potter. Bloodfong began writing out instructions on the parchment. There is one more matter we should address. Your key. What about it? The fact that Rubeus Hagrid was in possession of it is highly irregular. Vault keys are powerful magical artifacts tied to the vaults they open. They should only be in the possession of the vault owner or those expressly authorized by them. Harry's brow furrowed. So Hagrid shouldn't have had my key? No. And the fact that he did suggests Dumbledore has been using your key freely. Bloodfong held out his hand. With your permission, I would like to deactivate your current key and issue a new one keyed specifically to your magical signature so that only you can use it. Harry placed the small golden key on the desk. Do it. Bloodfong pressed his palm over the key, muttering something in a language Harry didn't recognize. The key briefly glowed red before dulling to a tarnished brass. It is now worthless, the goblin explained, opening another drawer to retrieve a blank key. This will become your new vault key. He pushed it toward Harry. 3 more drops of blood, if you please. Harry took the dagger again and let 3 drops fall onto the blank key. The metal seemed to absorb the blood like a sponge, then began to glow gold. Intricate patterns etched themselves across its surface, forming a design Harry somehow knew was unique to him. Now it is bonded to you, Bloodfong explained. It will grow warm in your hand but cold to anyone else who touches it without permission. If stolen, it will return to your vault within 24 hours. Thank you, Harry said, pocketing the key. For everything. I get the feeling not everyone would have been so thorough with my inheritance test. Bloodfang's expression turned grim. You are correct, Mr. Potter. There are those who would have preferred you remain ignorant of your true heritage. Goblins have long memories, however, and House Potter has always dealt fairly with the nation. We repay such respect in kind. They spent the next hour completing paperwork, forms to begin the emancipation process, documents authorizing the audit, new security measures for all of Harry's vaults. When they finished, Bloodfong summoned Griphook to take Harry to his trust vault. This is only your trust vault, Griphook explained as they sped through the tunnels in a cart that reminded Harry of a roller coaster. A small portion of the Potter wealth set aside for your schooling. The main Potter family vault and the vaults of the other houses you've inherited can only be accessed once your emancipation is finalized. When they finally stopped before Vault 687 and Griphook swung the door open, Harry gasped. Mounds of gold, silver, and bronze coins filled the chamber, glinting in the lamplight. And this is just my trust vault? Harry whispered. A mere fraction of your inheritance, Griphook confirmed. The contents of all 15 family vaults combined would fill a chamber 20 times this size, and that's not counting properties, investments, artifacts, and heirlooms. Harry filled his money pouch with far more galleons than he'd need for school supplies, instinctively knowing he might require resources for whatever came next. As they returned to the surface, he noticed Hagrid waiting in the main hall, looking slightly green. Never been fond of them carts, Hagrid explained when Harry approached. Got what you needed, then? Yes, Harry replied simply, offering no details about what had transpired. Something told him to keep his discoveries to himself for now. I'm ready to get my school things. Right-o. Let's get on with it then. Hagrid led the way back into Diagon Alley, apparently noticing nothing amiss. As they shopped for robes, books, and potion supplies, Harry's mind raced with everything he'd learned. Occasionally, his hand would drift to his pocket where multiple shrunken books from the Gringotts archives now rested alongside his new vault key. Blood Fong had provided them as part of their agreement, histories of his family lines, basic wizarding law, and financial management for young heirs. It wasn't until they entered Ollivander's for his wand that Harry felt the first direct consequence of his inheritance test. The wand-maker's silvery eyes widened almost imperceptibly when Harry entered. I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter, he said softly. It seems as though it was only yesterday that your mother and father were in here buying their first wands. As Ollivander moved closer, examining Harry's face, something changed in his expression. Curious, very curious indeed. What's curious, sir? Harry asked. Your magical aura, Mr. Potter. It's expanded since this morning. Ollivander's eyes flicked to Harry's pocket where the Gringotts books were hidden. I see you visited the goblins. Thorough, aren't they? Harry tensed, but Ollivander merely smiled. Fear not, Mr. Potter. Customer confidentiality is sacred in my profession as well. Now, let us find you a wand, or rather, let the wand find you. What followed was a long process of trying wand after wand, each producing increasingly dramatic effects as they rejected him. Shelves shook, windows cracked, and at one point, a shower of sparks nearly set Hagrid's beard on fire. Tricky customer, Ollivander muttered, seeming more delighted with each failure. Not to worry, we'll find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder. He disappeared into the back of the shop and returned with a dusty box. An unusual combination, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. The moment Harry's fingers closed around the wand, he felt a sudden warmth. He raised it above his head and brought it swishing down, sending a stream of red and gold sparks shooting from the end like fireworks. Curious, curious. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. Sorry, but what's curious? Harry asked, already suspecting the answer would complicate his life further. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. And it so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather resides in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar. Harry swallowed hard. Voldemort had the other one. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. I believe we can expect great things from you. After all, he who must not be named did great things, terrible, yes, but great. A chill ran down Harry's spine. Between his newfound inheritance and now this connection to Voldemort's wand, the universe seemed determined to mark him as anything but ordinary. After paying 7 gold galleons for his wand, Harry followed Hagrid back into Diagon Alley, his mind still reeling. They completed their shopping with Hagrid insisting on buying Harry a snowy owl as a birthday present, the first real birthday gift Harry could remember receiving. As they sat eating ice cream before heading back to the Muggle world, Harry gathered his courage to ask a carefully phrased question. Hagrid, who gave you my vault key? Was it Dumbledore? Hagrid nodded, his beard dipping into his chocolate and raspberry ice cream. Course it was. Dumbledore's been lookin' after your affairs since your parents died. Great man, Dumbledore. And my parents' will? Did Dumbledore ever mention what was in it? Hagrid's brow furrowed. Don't think I ever heard mention of a will. But I'm sure if there was one, Dumbledore would have made sure everything was done proper-like. Harry nodded noncommittally, filing away this confirmation of Hagrid's blind trust in the headmaster. And what about my mother's family? Were there no other wizards or witches who could have taken me in? Well now, Hagrid scratched his beard, your mum was Muggle-born, so her side was all muggles. As fair your dad's side, the Potters were mostly wiped out in the first war against you-know-who. There's distant relations, I suppose, but none close enough to claim ya. Dumbledore thought you'd be safest with your aunt and uncle anyway, blood protection and all that. Blood protection. Another piece of the puzzle, though Harry wasn't sure where it fit yet. He would need to look for information on blood-based magic in the materials Bloodfang had provided. I see, Harry said. Thank you for bringing me here today, Hagrid. It's been educational. Don't mention it, Hagrid beamed, oblivious to the understatement. Just wait till ye get to Hogwarts. Best place in the world, it is. And with Dumbledore as headmaster, well, you couldn't be in safer hands. Harry smiled thinly, thinking of the 2 million galleons those safe hands had pilfered from his vaults. I'm looking forward to meeting him. The remainder of Harry's summer passed in a strange limbo. By day, he endured the Dursleys' usual treatment, though he noted with bitter amusement how Vernon's complaints about Harry's financial burden rang hollow now that he knew about the payments they'd received. By night, Harry devoured the books from Gringotts by Wandlight, learning about his heritage and the wizarding world's political structure. He discovered that as heir to multiple ancient and noble houses, he would eventually hold 15 votes in the Wizengamot, the wizarding high court and legislative body. Even more significantly, several of his inherited houses, Peveril, Black, and Gryffindor in particular, came with special privileges and authorities dating back to the founding of wizarding Britain. He also received regular correspondence from Bloodfang, delivered by serious-looking owls that arrived only after midnight. The Goblin reported steady progress on the audit, each letter detailing more extensive theft than initially discovered. Beyond the direct vault withdrawals, Dumbledore had apparently redirected investment income, magical artifact leasing fees, and property rents that should have gone to Harry's accounts. Most troubling was the revelation that several Potter family heirlooms had vanished from the main vault, items whose magical properties were supposedly significant but whose descriptions remained frustratingly vague in the records Bloodfang could access. The Potter invisibility cloak, in particular, is of grave concern, Bloodfang wrote in one letter. Such an artifact would be priceless and, in the wrong hands, potentially dangerous. Our records show it was last properly documented in your parents' possession but has not been returned to any Potter vault since their deaths. As September 1st approached, Harry formulated a careful plan. He would go to Hogwarts as expected, maintain a facade of ignorance about his inheritance and Dumbledore's thefts, and gather as much information as possible about the headmaster's motivations and allies. Meanwhile, Gringotts would continue the audit and emancipation process discreetly. On his last night at Privet Drive, Harry wrote a final letter to Bloodfang. I'll be at Hogwarts starting tomorrow, directly under Dumbledore's watch. I think it's best if we pause our regular correspondence until I can determine how mail is monitored at the school. Please proceed with all planned legal actions but delay any that would require my public involvement until the winter holidays. By then, I should know enough to decide how to proceed openly. Thank you for your continued assistance. The House of Potter won't forget the nation's loyalty in this matter. Respectfully, Harry J. Potter, heir to Houses Potter, Peveril, Gryffindor, Slytherin, by conquest, Black, Ravenclaw, Emrys, Le Fay, Pendragon, Hufflepuff, by magic, Flammel, by oath, Merlin, by magic, Ambrosius, by blood, Bones, by oath, and Greengrass, by contract. Writing out his full inherited titles still felt ridiculous to Harry, but Bloodfang had insisted it was proper protocol for formal correspondence. He sealed the letter and gave it to Hedwig, his snowy owl, with instructions to deliver it directly to Bloodfang and return before morning. As Harry packed his trunk for Hogwarts, he carefully positioned his school books to hide the Gringotts materials beneath. Whatever awaited him at Hogwarts, he was determined to be prepared. Dumbledore had stolen more than money from him. He'd stolen Harry's chance at a happy childhood, ignored his parents' wishes, and manipulated his life from the shadows. That debt would eventually be repaid in full. Platform 9 3/4 bustled with activity as Harry pushed his trolley through the magical barrier. Hedwig's cage balanced precariously atop his trunk. Families crowded the platform, parents offering last-minute advice to children hanging out of train windows, owls hooting indignantly at the commotion, cats of every color weaving between legs. Harry had arrived alone, having taken the Underground to King's Cross after Vernon reluctantly dropped him at the station in London. Following the written instructions on his ticket, he'd located the hidden platform entrance between platforms 9 and 10, though it had taken considerable courage to walk straight at what appeared to be a solid brick wall. Now, as steam from the Scarlet Hogwarts Express billowed around him, Harry felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension. Somewhere in the castle that awaited him at the journey's end was the man who had betrayed his parents' trust and stolen his inheritance. But Hogwarts also represented freedom from the Dursleys and the beginning of his true education in magic. "Need a hand with that, dear?" A plump, red-haired woman approached, gesturing to Harry's trunk. "Fred. George. Come help this young man with his trunk." Two identical red-headed boys bounded over, lifting Harry's trunk with exaggerated grunts. "Thanks," Harry said, smiling at their antics. "Not a problem," one twin replied. "Happy to help a fellow first year," added the other. "I'm Fred, by the way." "And I'm George." "Or am I Fred?" "And am I George?" The woman swatted them both lightly on the shoulders. "Stop confusing the poor boy and get his trunk on the train." As the twins manhandled his luggage onto the train, Harry caught a fragment of conversation between the woman and a younger boy with the same vivid red hair. "Remember what Dumbledore said, Ron. Just be yourself and, I know, Mum," the boy, Ron, interrupted, his ears turning pink. "Make friends with Harry Potter. You've told me a dozen times." Harry froze, his back still to the family as he pretended to adjust Hedwig's cage. Dumbledore had arranged for someone to befriend him. Was nothing in his life free from the old man's manipulation? "It's not like that," the woman hissed, her voice dropping lower. "Dumbledore just wants to make sure the poor boy has support. He's been living with muggles all this time, doesn't know our ways. He'll need a good wizarding family to show him the ropes." "And put in a good word for Dumbledore," muttered another redhead, older, with horn-rimmed glasses. "After all, Potter's going to be rather important when he's older, isn't he? Politically speaking." "Percy." "That's not," the woman's protest was cut short by the train's warning whistle. Harry boarded quickly, finding an empty compartment toward the rear of the train. He settled by the window, pretending to be absorbed in watching the platform while his mind raced. So Dumbledore was already positioning people to influence him. The question was, did this family know about the theft, or were they simply unwitting tools in Dumbledore's schemes? The compartment door slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy, Ron, stood awkwardly in the doorway. "Anyone sitting there?" he asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. "Everywhere else is full." Harry doubted that was true, they'd only just boarded, but he nodded anyway. Better to keep potential spies where he could see them. "I'm Ron, by the way." "Ron Weasley," the boy said as he sat down. "Harry Potter," Harry replied, watching carefully for the reaction. It came as expected, widened eyes, a quick glance at his forehead, then an attempt to seem casual that failed miserably. "Are you really? Do you have the, you know?" Ron gestured vaguely to his forehead. Harry lifted his fringe to reveal the lightning scar. "Wicked," Ron breathed. "And do you remember anything about, you know, when you know who tried to kill me?" Harry finished bluntly. "Just a lot of green light. Nothing else." They were interrupted by the twins, Fred and George, poking their heads in to introduce themselves properly and tease Ron before departing to see a friend's tarantula. As the train pulled away from the station, Harry found himself engaging in surprisingly normal conversation with Ron about wizarding suites, Quidditch, and their respective families. "I've got 5 older brothers," Ron was saying gloomily. "Bill and Charlie have already left Hogwarts. Bill was head boy and Charlie was Quidditch captain. Now Percy's a prefect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get good marks. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal because they did it first. The genuine frustration in Ron's voice made Harry reconsider his initial suspicion. Perhaps Ron himself wasn't actively part of some conspiracy, just a boy whose family had been enlisted by Dumbledore to guide Harry. "What about you?" Ron asked. "What's it like living with Muggles?" Harry hesitated, considering how much to reveal. "Not great," he said finally. "My aunt and uncle didn't tell me anything about being a wizard. Said my parents died in a car crash." "A car crash? That's mental. Everyone knows what happened to your parents. You're famous." "Not in the Muggle world," Harry replied. "There, I was just, unwanted." Something in his tone must have conveyed more than his words, because Ron's expression shifted from incredulity to concern. "That bad, was it?" Harry shrugged. "Could have been worse, I suppose." He deliberately changed the subject. "So all your family are wizards?" Ron nodded. "I think Mum's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we don't talk about him much." Their conversation continued as the train carried them through countryside that gradually grew wilder. Harry found himself genuinely enjoying Ron's company despite his suspicions about Dumbledore's involvement. The boy seemed honest in his own frustrations and insecurities, and his descriptions of wizarding life were fascinating. Around 12:30, a dimpled woman slid back their door. "Anything off the cart, dears?" Harry, hungry after a breakfastless morning, leapt to his feet. Ron's ears went pink as he muttered something about sandwiches. Noting the worn state of Ron's clothes and remembering his complaints about hand-me-downs, Harry made a quick decision. "We'll take the lot," he said, pulling out several gold galleons. When Ron protested, Harry added, "Consider it payment for explaining all these sweets to me. I've no idea what's good." They spent a happy hour sampling every flavor: beans, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, and other magical treats. Harry was particularly intrigued by the famous witches and wizards cards that came with the chocolate frogs. His fifth card featured Albus Dumbledore himself, eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. "So this is Dumbledore," Harry murmured, studying the image carefully. The man looked grandfatherly and kind, hardly the sort one would suspect of theft and manipulation. "Don't tell me you'd never heard of Dumbledore," said Ron. "Can I have a frog?" "I might get Agrippa, thanks." Harry turned over the card and read, "Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner, Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and tenpin bowling." Harry's eyes widened at the mention of Nicholas Flamel, one of the houses he had apparently inherited through some ancient oath. Silently, he tucked the card into his pocket for later reference. Their peaceful compartment was soon interrupted by a round-faced boy searching for a lost toad, followed shortly by a girl with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth, already wearing her Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "Neville's lost one," she said in a bossy sort of voice. "We've already told him we haven't seen it," Ron replied, but the girl wasn't listening. Her eyes had fixed on the wand he'd pulled out to show Harry a spell his brothers had taught him. "Oh, are you doing magic? Let's see it, then." She sat down, staring expectantly at Ron, who looked taken aback. All right." He cleared his throat. "Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow, turn this stupid, fat rat yellow." He waved his wand, but nothing happened to the sleeping rat on his lap. "Are you sure that's a real spell?" the girl asked. "Well, it's not very good, is it? I've tried a few simple spells just for practice and they've all worked for me. Nobody in my family's magic at all, so it was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased, of course. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you?" She said all this very fast. Harry looked at Ron and was relieved to see his bewildered expression matched Harry's own. I'm Ron Weasley, Ron muttered. Harry Potter, Harry added. Are you really? Hermione asked, her eyes widening. I know all about you, of course. I got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. Am I? Harry asked, genuinely surprised. He hadn't thought to purchase history books during his brief visit to Diagon Alley. Goodness, didn't you know? I'd have found out everything I could if it was me, Hermione said. Do either of you know what house you'll be in? I've been asking around, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I hear Dumbledore himself was in it, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Harry's ears perked up at the mention of Gryffindor, another of his inherited houses. What exactly determines which house you're sorted into? Some sort of test, I think, Ron replied. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking. Hermione launched into a detailed explanation of the 4 houses, Gryffindor for the brave, Hufflepuff for the loyal, Ravenclaw for the clever, and Slytherin for the ambitious. Harry noted with interest that he had inherited titles from all 4 Hogwarts founders, making him, in a sense, heir to the entire school. After Hermione departed, taking Neville with her to continue searching for his toad, Ron expressed relief. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it. Bloody nightmare, that one. Harry wasn't so sure. Hermione seemed overeager and somewhat socially awkward, but her obvious intelligence and preparation could make her a valuable ally. If Dumbledore had people watching Harry, he would need friends of his own who weren't connected to the headmaster. The compartment door slid open again, this time revealing 3 boys. Harry recognized the pale, pointed face of the middle one from Madame Malkin's robe shop in Diagon Alley. Is it true? The boy asked. They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it? Yes, Harry answered, studying the other 2 boys, both thick-set and mean-looking, standing like bodyguards on either side of the pale boy. Oh, this is Crabbe and this is Goyle, the pale boy said carelessly, noticing Harry's gaze. And my name's Malfoy, Draco Malfoy. Ron coughed slightly, which might have been hiding a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford. He turned back to Harry. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. This interaction was clearly about more than just schoolboy rivalry, it was political, and Harry recognized an opportunity to gather information. I appreciate the offer, Malfoy, he said carefully, but I think I can figure out the wrong sort for myself. Malfoy's pale cheeks turned slightly pink. I'd be careful if I were you, Potter. Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them either. You hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys, and it'll rub off on you. Both Harry and Ron stood up. Ron's face was as red as his hair, but Harry remained calm, calculating. Say that again, Ron challenged. Oh, you're going to fight us, are you? Malfoy sneered. Unless you leave now, Harry said, not taking his eyes off Malfoy's. He recalled a passage from one of Bloodfang's books on pure blood etiquette. Direct eye contact was considered either a challenge or an acknowledgement of equals. He was curious to see which way Malfoy would interpret it. But we don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some. Goyle reached toward the chocolate frogs beside Ron. Ron leapt forward, but before he could touch Goyle, the larger boy let out a horrible yell. Hanging from his finger was Ron's rat, Scabbers, tiny teeth sunk deep into Goyle's knuckle. In the ensuing chaos, Goyle swinging Scabbers around until the rat finally flew off and hit the window, Hermione reappeared at their compartment door. What has been going on? She demanded, looking at the scattered sweets and Ron picking up his dazed rat by the tail. "I think they were just leaving," Harry said pointedly to Malfoy and his cronies, who backed away with final glares. After they departed, Harry turned to Ron. "What's the story with the Malfoys? He seemed to have a particular problem with your family." Ron's expression darkened. "Old feud. The Malfoys are rich purebloods who supported you-know-who during the war, though they claimed afterward they'd been bewitched. Dad says Lucius Malfoy, Draco's father, didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side. This was useful information. If the Malfoys had supported Voldemort, they would naturally oppose Dumbledore. While Harry wasn't about to trust someone like Draco Malfoy, understanding the political landscape of Wizarding Britain would be essential to navigating his complex situation. As the train journey continued, Harry found himself mentally cataloguing everyone he met according to their potential allegiances and usefulness. It was a cold way of thinking, one he wasn't entirely comfortable with, but necessary given the circumstances. Someone had stolen his inheritance, placed him with abusive relatives against his parents' wishes, and was now apparently orchestrating his friendships. Caution seemed prudent. Evening fell, and a voice echoed through the train announcing their imminent arrival at Hogsmeade Station. Harry and Ron changed into their school robes, and soon the train was slowing to a stop. As they joined the crowd in the corridor, Harry felt a flutter of anticipation in his stomach. Whatever lay ahead at Hogwarts, danger, discovery, or some combination of both, at least he was entering with his eyes open. The moment the train doors opened, Hagrid's familiar voice boomed over the platform, "Fur's years. Fur's years over here." Harry followed the half-giant's lantern down a steep, narrow path that opened suddenly onto the shore of a vast black lake. There, silhouetted against the starry sky, stood Hogwarts Castle, a magnificent structure of turrets and towers, windows sparkling in the night. "No more N4 to a boat," Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of small boats by the shore. Harry and Ron were joined in their boat by Hermione and Neville. As the fleet glided across the smooth, glass-like surface of the lake, Harry felt a strange sensation, almost like recognition, as they drew nearer to the castle. According to his inheritance test, he was magically connected to the very foundations of Hogwarts through his Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff bloodlines. The boats carried them through a curtain of ivy into an underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. Hagrid, after finding Neville's lost toad, led them up a passageway in the rock to emerge on smooth, damp grass in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door. "Everyone here." Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times. The door swung open immediately to reveal a tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes. Her stern face and tight bun reminded Harry of strict teachers he'd had in primary school. "The Fur's years, Professor McGonagall," said Hagrid. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." Harry perked up at the name. Minerva McGonagall had been listed in his parents' will as one of his potential guardians. As she led them across the flagged stone floor and into a small chamber off the hall, he studied her carefully. Did she know she had been named in the will? Had she agreed to Dumbledore's decision to place him with the Dursleys instead? Professor McGonagall welcomed them to Hogwarts and explained the house system and the importance of the sorting ceremony that was about to take place. "I shall return when we are ready for you," she said. "Please wait quietly." As soon as she left, nervous speculation broke out among the first years about how exactly they would be sorted. Ron mentioned something about wrestling a troll, which Harry highly doubted, while Hermione whispered frantically about all the spells she'd learned that might be useful. Harry remained quiet, pondering the fact that according to his inheritance, he had claim to all 4 houses. Would the sorting hat, if that was indeed how they were sorted, take that into account? Or would it place him based purely on his personal qualities? And what would best serve his long-term goals of reclaiming his inheritance and discovering why Dumbledore had manipulated his life? His musings were interrupted by the arrival of about 20 ghosts streaming through the back wall, pearly white and slightly transparent. They appeared to be arguing about someone named Peeves until they noticed the first years. "New students," exclaimed a fat monk. About to be sorted, I suppose. A few people nodded mutely. Hope to see you in Hufflepuff, the monk continued. My old house, you know. Harry felt an odd tingling sensation as the Hufflepuff ghost spoke, almost like a faint magical recognition. Before he could dwell on it, Professor McGonagall returned to escort them into the Great Hall. The vast chamber was lit by thousands of candles floating in midair over 4 long tables where the rest of the students were sitting. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers sat. Harry scanned the staff quickly, his eyes landing on a silver-haired figure in the center, Albus Dumbledore, instantly recognizable from his chocolate frog card. Their eyes met briefly across the hall, and Harry felt a curious sensation, like the lightest touch against his thoughts. Instinctively, he looked away, recalling another passage from Bloodfang's materials about certain powerful wizards being able to glimpse surface thoughts through eye contact. Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first years and set a pointed wizard's hat upon it, patched, frayed, and extremely dirty. To Harry's amazement, a rip near the brim opened like a mouth, and the hat began to sing, "Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see, I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me." The hat's song explained the qualities of each Hogwarts house: bravery for Gryffindor, hard work for Hufflepuff, wisdom for Ravenclaw, and cunning for Slytherin. As it finished to thunderous applause, Harry contemplated which house would best suit his purposes. Gryffindor seemed the obvious choice given his parents' history, but Slytherin's emphasis on ambition and cunning might better serve his complex situation. Then again, Ravenclaw's value of intelligence and learning could provide cover for his research into Dumbledore's activities, while Hufflepuff's reputation for being overlooked might allow him to operate with less scrutiny. Professor McGonagall began calling students forward alphabetically. Each sat on the stool, put on the hat, and after varying periods of deliberation, the hat would shout out a house name. The student would then join their new housemates at the appropriate table. As Potter, Harry, was called, whispers suddenly broke out across the hall. Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter? Harry stepped forward, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes following his every move. As the hat dropped over his eyes, he found himself in darkness. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. But what's this? Oh my. Harry felt the hat's surprise as it presumably discovered his complex heritage. The heir of all 4 founders, the hat whispered, sounding genuinely shocked. Not to mention the others. I haven't seen such a complicated inheritance in, well, never, actually. And you already know about it. Fascinating. So where shall I put you? Harry thought carefully. Wherever I can best achieve my goals, he replied mentally. Ah, those goals. Reclaiming what was stolen, unmasking deception, finding the truth. Very ambitious, very Slytherin. But there's more to you than revenge, isn't there? A desire for justice, not just for yourself but for others. That speaks of Gryffindor. And the methodical way you're approaching it all, quite Ravenclaw. The loyalty you feel to your parents' memory, very Hufflepuff. If you truly can't decide, perhaps I should choose based on what would be most useful to me, Harry suggested. Strategic thinking. Well then, in that case, better be Gryffindor. The hat shouted the last word to the entire hall. Harry removed it and walked toward the Gryffindor table, where he received the loudest cheer yet. Percy Weasley the prefect shook his hand vigorously, while the Weasley twins yelled, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" As Harry sat down, he caught Dumbledore's eye again. The headmaster raised his goblet slightly in a gesture that might have seemed friendly to anyone else, but which Harry now recognized as the subtle acknowledgement of a chess player whose pieces were moving into position. Let him think that, Harry thought grimly. Let him believe I know nothing. The sorting continued, with Ron eventually joining Harry in Gryffindor as expected. Once the last student was sorted, Dumbledore got to his feet, beaming at the students with his arms opened wide. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you." He sat back down to cheers and applause. Harry raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Is he, a bit mad?" he asked Percy, deliberately playing the role of the naive newcomer. "Mad? He's a genius. Best wizard in the world." "But yes, he is a bit mad," Percy replied. "Potatoes, Harry." The golden plates before them were suddenly filled with food. Harry, who hadn't eaten properly in days, loaded his plate but continued his careful observation of the staff table between bites. Beside Dumbledore sat Professor McGonagall, deep in conversation with a tiny wizard Harry would later learn was Professor Flitwick. On Dumbledore's other side was a hook-nosed, greasy-haired man who suddenly looked past another teacher directly at Harry. A sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead. "Ouch!" Harry clapped a hand to his head. "What is it?" asked Percy. "Nothing," Harry lied smoothly. "Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell?" He pointed to the hook-nosed man. "That's Professor Snape. He teaches potions, but everyone knows he's after Quirrell's job. Knows an awful lot about the dark arts, Snape." Harry watched Snape for a while, noting how the man's eyes kept darting back to him with an expression that bordered on loathing. Another mystery to unravel. As the feast continued, Harry carefully extracted information from his housemates about the professors, the castle, and wizarding politics, all while maintaining the appearance of innocent curiosity. He was particularly interested when nearly headless Nick, the Gryffindor ghost, mentioned that Peeves the poltergeist would only listen to the Bloody Baron, the Slytherin ghost. "I don't even know if he'll listen to Dumbledore," Nick added. Harry filed this away, potentially useful information about the limits of the headmaster's authority within the castle. When the desserts disappeared and Dumbledore rose again for announcements, Harry paid close attention. Most seemed standard, warnings about the forbidden forest and magic in corridors, until the headmaster's tone grew more serious. "And finally, I must tell you that this year, the third-floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death." A few students laughed, but Harry didn't. Why would a school have an area so dangerous it could cause death? And why announce it in a way that would inevitably pique students' curiosity? As the school sang the Hogwarts song, everyone finishing at different times in a cacophony that made Harry wince, he considered his position. He was now in Dumbledore's domain, surrounded by people loyal to the old wizard. Yet he also had knowledge the headmaster didn't expect him to possess and allies in Gringotts working on his behalf. It would be a delicate game, but Harry was increasingly confident he could play it. After all, no one would suspect an 11-year-old of orchestrating a complex legal and financial counterattack against the greatest wizard of the age. Percy led the first years through the chattering crowds to Gryffindor Tower, stopping before a portrait of a fat lady in a pink silk dress. "Password?" she asked. "Caput Draconis," said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. As Harry climbed into the Gryffindor common room, a cozy, round room full of squashy armchairs, he felt a curious sense of homecoming. According to his inheritance test, he was the magical heir of Godric Gryffindor himself. In some sense, he truly was home. Percy directed the girls through one door to their dormitory and the boys through another. At the top of a spiral staircase, they found their beds, 5 four-posters hung with deep red, velvet curtains. Their trunks had already been brought up. As the other boys chatted sleepily, Harry quietly placed privacy charms around his bed, simple ones he'd learned from one of Bloodfang's books. They wouldn't stop a determined intrusion, especially from someone like Dumbledore, but they would alert Harry if anyone tried to access his trunk while he slept. Lying back on his four-poster, Harry reflected on the extraordinary day. In just a few weeks, he had gone from believing himself a friendless orphan to discovering he was heir to 15 ancient houses, wealthy beyond imagination, and the target of a systematic theft by one of the most powerful wizards alive. Tomorrow, his real education would begin, not just in magic, but in navigating the hidden currents of power and deception that seemed to flow beneath the surface of the wizarding world. As he drifted towards sleep, Harry made a silent promise to his parents: "I'll find out why he did it. Why he ignored your will. Why he stole from me. And when the time is right, I'll make him answer for it all." With that resolution firm in his mind, the heir to 15 houses fell asleep in a castle that, by birthright, could have been partly his, had the truth not been hidden from him for so long. Chapter 2, Masks and Maneuvers. Harry woke before dawn on his first day at Hogwarts. The unfamiliar comfort of a real bed, not his cupboard, not Dudley's second bedroom, made sleep elusive. 4 other boys snored peacefully in the Gryffindor dormitory as Harry silently slipped from beneath his crimson hangings and padded to the window. The grounds below were shrouded in morning mist, Hagrid's hut a shadowy outline at the forest's edge. Somewhere in the castle below, Albus Dumbledore slept, the man who had orchestrated the theft of Harry's inheritance and condemned him to 10 miserable years with the Dursleys. Not for much longer, Harry whispered to his reflection in the windowpane. He returned to his bed and carefully opened his trunk, retrieving a leather-bound journal Bloodfang had provided. Its pages were enchanted to appear blank to anyone but him. Harry uncorked a bottle of ink, dipped his quill, and began his first entry. September 2nd, 1991. I've arrived at Hogwarts and been sorted into Gryffindor as expected. Dumbledore watches me carefully but shows no sign of suspecting I know about the theft. I've identified several potential allies and complications. Ron Weasley, friendly but his family appears connected to Dumbledore. Possible unwitting spy. Hermione Granger, intelligent Muggle-born. No obvious connections to existing power structures. Potential ally if approached carefully. Neville Longbottom, parents were listed in mine as potential guardians. Family historically allied with Potters according to Bloodfang's materials. Currently lacks confidence but worth cultivating. Draco Malfoy, family opposed Dumbledore but supported Voldemort. Possible source of information but dangerous connection. Severus Snape, shows inexplicable hostility. Unknown allegiances beyond Dumbledore as employer. The Sorting Hat recognized my inheritance when placed on my head. If it reports to Dumbledore, my cover may already be compromised. Must proceed with caution. Today classes begin. My strategy: appear average in public while studying advanced material privately. Must establish baseline magical abilities without revealing full potential. Harry closed the journal, whispering an incantation that sealed it against tampering. By the time the other boys stirred, he was dressed and reviewing his course schedule, the perfect picture of an eager first year. "Blimey, Harry, you're up early," Ron mumbled, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Breakfast doesn't start for another hour." "Couldn't sleep," Harry replied with a genuine smile. Despite his suspicions about the Weasley family's connections to Dumbledore, he found himself liking Ron. "Too excited, I guess." "Mental, that's what you are," Ron yawned, but he dragged himself out of bed anyway. "Might as well get a good seat in the Great Hall. Fred says the mail delivery is something to see." Whispers followed Harry from the moment he left the Gryffindor common room. "There, look." "Where?" "Next to the tall red-haired boy. Wearing the glasses. Did you see his face? Did you see his scar?" Students lined up outside classrooms to gawk as he passed, doubled back in corridors to stare, stood on tiptoes to catch glimpses over classmates' heads. Harry pretended not to notice, but inwardly he catalogued each reaction, noting which students seemed merely curious and which appeared calculating in their interest. "You'll get used to it," Ron assured him as they navigated the bewildering castle. "Fred and George say the novelty wears off after a few weeks." Harry wasn't so sure. The boy who lived wasn't just a celebrity, he was a symbol, a walking reminder of Voldemort's defeat. And symbols, Harry was beginning to understand, were powerful tools in wizarding politics. Their first class was Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall, who confirmed Harry's initial impression of strictness within moments of their arrival. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she lectured after transforming her desk into a pig and back. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned. She set them the task of turning matches into needles. Harry, remembering his strategy, deliberately held back. After several attempts yielding only partial transformations, he glanced around the classroom. Most students were struggling entirely, but Hermione Granger had already produced a perfect silver needle. McGonagall showed the class Hermione's success with a rare smile. When she passed Harry's desk, she paused at his half-transformed match, silver but still wooden in texture. Your father had a natural talent for transfiguration, Mr. Potter, she said quietly. With practice, I expect you will too. The personal comment about his father caught Harry off guard. Was it innocent reminiscence or a calculated attempt to establish rapport? McGonagall had been named in his parents' will, after all. Did she know? Had she agreed with Dumbledore's decision to ignore their wishes? Thank you, Professor, he replied neutrally. I'll keep practicing. By lunchtime, Harry had collected a mental inventory of his classes and professors. Herbology with Professor Sprout presented opportunities to work alongside Neville, who showed surprising knowledge of magical plants. History of magic with ghostly Professor Binns was useful only as study time for other subjects. Charms with tiny Professor Flitwick, who squeaked excitedly when reaching Harry's name during roll call, seemed genuinely practical. The real test came Friday morning with double potions alongside Slytherin. By then, Harry had heard enough about Professor Snape to expect hostility, but even he was unprepared for the level of animosity radiating from the hook-nosed potions master. Ah, yes, Snape said softly during roll call, Harry Potter. Our new celebrity. Draco Malfoy and his friends Crabbe and Goyle sniggered behind their hands. Snape finished calling the names and looked up at the class, his eyes cold and empty. You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion-making, he began, speaking barely above a whisper that nonetheless carried in the silent dungeon. I don't expect you will really understand the beauty of the softly simmering cauldron with its shimmering fumes, the delicate power of liquids that creep through human veins, bewitching the mind, and snaring the senses. Harry, despite himself, was impressed by the poetry in Snape's words. The man clearly loved his subject, even if he appeared to despise his students. Potter. Snape said suddenly. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Hermione's hand shot into the air beside Harry, but he barely noticed. His mind raced to the potions textbook he'd studied. More importantly, he debated how to respond. Demonstrate knowledge and risk standing out, or play dumb and reinforce Snape's apparent low opinion. A third option occurred to him, one that might yield information. I don't know, sir, Harry said carefully, but I believe asphodel is a type of lily. Something flickered in Snape's black eyes, surprise, perhaps, or recognition. Clearly fame isn't everything, Snape sneered, ignoring Hermione's raised hand. Let's try again. Potter, where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? This time, Harry chose to display modest knowledge. In the stomach of a goat, I think, sir. It can save you from most poisons. Snape's lips curled into a reluctant almost not quite smile. Correct. Though I notice you've neglected to open your textbook to page 7, where this information is clearly stated. Perhaps you believe yourself above such mundane preparation. No, sir, Harry answered truthfully. I read it before term started. Indeed. Snape's expression grew calculating. And what is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? Hermione stretched her hand as high as possible without leaving her seat, but Harry already knew the answer from his additional reading. They're the same plant, sir. Also called aconite. The potions master stared at Harry for a long moment, as though trying to reconcile the child before him with some preconceived notion. "Well?" Snape suddenly barked at the rest of the class. "Why aren't you all copying that down?" As quills scratched on parchment, Snape added, "And a point to Gryffindor for basic preparation, Potter." The grudging award of a single house point seemed to shock the Slytherins as much as the Gryffindors. Ron gave Harry an incredulous look as they began brewing a simple potion to cure boils. "What was that about?" he whispered as they crushed snake fangs. "Snape never gives points to Gryffindor." Harry shrugged, but inwardly he was analyzing the interaction. Snape clearly had a history with Harry's family, the reaction to the Lily reference confirmed it. But the hostility seemed personal rather than connected to Dumbledore's schemes. Another mystery to unravel. The rest of the potions lesson proceeded with Snape sweeping around criticizing nearly everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to favor. When Neville melted Seamus Finnegan's cauldron, creating a caustic mess that burned holes in people's shoes, Snape rounded on Harry. "You, Potter, why didn't you tell him not to add the quills? Thought he'd make you look good if he got it wrong, did you? That's another point you've lost for Gryffindor." Harry bit back a retort, knowing a confrontation would serve no purpose. The pattern was clear: Snape would find reasons to target him regardless of his performance. Best to excel quietly in the subject while accepting the professor's animosity as inevitable. That afternoon, Harry received an invitation that confirmed his suspicions about being watched. Hagrid had sent a note asking him to tea. The timing seemed too convenient to be coincidence, after a trying first week when a homesick first year might be vulnerable to friendly overtures. "Want to come with me to Hagrid's?" Harry asked Ron, deliberately maintaining their budding friendship for now. Whatever the Weasleys' connection to Dumbledore, keeping Ron close allowed Harry to monitor what information might flow back to the headmaster. Hagrid lived in a small wooden house on the edge of the Forbidden Forest. A crossbow and a pair of galoshes stood outside the front door. When Harry knocked, frantic scrabbling and booming barks echoed from within. "Back, Fong, back!" Hagrid ordered before cracking the door open. "Hang on. Back, Fong!" Hagrid's big, hairy face appeared in the crack as he let them in, struggling to keep hold of an enormous black boarhound by the collar. "Make yourselves at home," Hagrid said, releasing Fong, who bounded straight at Ron and began licking his ears. "This is Ron," Harry introduced as they sat in Hagrid's single room. Rock cakes and tea had been laid out on a rough wooden table. "Another Weasley, eh?" Hagrid glanced at Ron's freckles. "I spent half me life chasin' your twin brothers away from the forest." The conversation flowed naturally to their first week of classes. Harry carefully mentioned his confusion about Snape's apparent dislike. "Rubbish," said Hagrid, though he didn't quite meet Harry's eyes. "Why should he?" The evasion was telling. Harry pressed gently. "He seemed to almost hate me on sight. Is it just because I'm in Gryffindor?" Hagrid busied himself making more tea. "Professor Snape has his ways with all students. Don't take it personally." As Ron distracted Hagrid with questions about his gamekeeper duties, Harry spotted a clipping from the Daily Prophet lying on the table. Gringotts break-in. Latest investigations continue into the break-in at Gringotts on July 31st, widely believed to be the work of dark wizards or witches unknown. Gringotts goblins insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault in question had in fact been emptied the same day. "But we're not telling you what was in there, so keep your noses out if you know what's good for you," said a Gringotts spokesgoblin this afternoon. Harry remembered the date, his birthday, when Hagrid had taken him to Diagon Alley. He recalled Hagrid's mysterious retrieval of a small package from Vault 713. "It's Hogwarts business. Very secret," Hagrid had said. "Hagrid!" Harry exclaimed, pointing at the article. "That Gringotts break-in happened on my birthday. It might have been happening while we were there." Hagrid definitely didn't meet Harry's eyes this time, grunting and offering another rock cake. The connection seemed clear: whatever Hagrid had removed from Gringotts had been the target of the break-in, and that same item was now likely hidden at Hogwarts, perhaps in the forbidden third-floor corridor Dumbledore had mentioned at the welcoming feast. As they walked back to the castle for dinner, Harry's mind worked furiously. What could be so valuable that dark wizards would risk breaking into Gringotts? And why would Dumbledore store it at a school full of children rather than in his personal vault or at the Ministry? That was strange about Snape, Ron commented as they climbed the castle steps. Hagrid definitely knows something he's not telling. Harry nodded absently, his thoughts elsewhere. If Dumbledore was hiding something valuable at Hogwarts, understanding its significance might provide leverage or insight into the headmaster's broader schemes. That night, after his dormmates fell asleep, Harry cast privacy charms and retrieved one of Bloodfang's books on magical inheritance. He'd been studying it systematically, focusing on the houses he'd inherited and their special properties or abilities. House Potter, his paternal line, was known for exceptional talent in protective magic and transfiguration. House Peverell, an ancient line that had eventually merged with the Potters, was associated with magic concerning death and invisibility. House Black, through his grandmother, carried affinities for mental magic including occlumency, the art of protecting one's mind from external intrusion. Most intriguing were the Hogwarts founder houses. As heir to Gryffindor, Slytherin, by conquest, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff, Harry technically held claim to the castle itself. According to Bloodfang's texts, each founder had embedded special privileges for their bloodline descendants, privileges that had largely faded into myth as the direct lines died out or went dormant. Harry closed the book, frustrated by the vague descriptions. If he possessed special abilities through his complex inheritance, how would he recognize them? And more practically, how could he safely explore them without alerting Dumbledore? The opportunity came sooner than expected. Flying lessons. Ron exclaimed at breakfast the following Thursday, examining the notice that had appeared on the common room bulletin board. Starting today. Just what I always wanted, Harry heard Neville mutter nervously further down the table. To make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life, having been forbidden by his grandmother. Privately, Harry thought this was wise given Neville's propensity for accidents on solid ground. You'll be fine, Harry reassured him, deliberately taking the seat beside the round-faced boy. He'd been slowly cultivating Neville's acquaintance, remembering that the Longbottoms had been allies of House Potter and named as his potential guardians. Most people are nervous their first time flying. Thanks, Harry, Neville said with a grateful smile. Gran always tells me I'm not brave enough for Gryffindor, but you've been really decent to me. Your Gran is wrong, Harry said firmly. The Sorting Hat put you in Gryffindor for a reason. He hesitated, then added, besides, our families were friends, you know. Before everything happened. Neville's eyes widened. Really? Gran never mentioned that. My parents named yours as potential guardians in their will, Harry said quietly, watching Neville carefully. I only found out recently. I didn't know, Neville stammered, clearly shocked. Gran never said. If your parents trusted mine that much. It means our families must have been close, Harry finished. I thought you might like to know. Neville straightened slightly, a new determination in his eyes. Thank you for telling me, Harry. I won't forget it. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of mail. Harry, who rarely received anything, was surprised when 6 large screech owls swooped down carrying a long, thin package. They dropped it right in front of him, knocking his bacon to the floor, and another owl delivered a letter on top of the parcel. Harry opened the letter first. Do not open the parcel at the table. It contains your new Nimbus 2000, but I don't want everybody knowing you've got a broomstick or they'll all want one. Oliver Wood will meet you tonight on the Quidditch field at 7 o'clock for your first training session. Professor M. McGonagall. Harry passed the note to Ron, whose eyes bulged. A Nimbus 2000. Ron moaned enviously. I've never even touched one. They left the hall quickly, wanting to unwrap the broomstick in private before their first class, but Malfoy intercepted them in the entrance hall. He seized the package and felt it. "That's a broomstick," he said, throwing it back to Harry with a mixture of jealousy and spite. "You'll be in for it this time, Potter. First years aren't allowed broomsticks." Before Harry could respond, Professor Flitwick appeared at Malfoy's elbow. "Not arguing, I hope, boys," he squeaked. "Potter's been sent a broomstick, Professor," Malfoy said quickly. Yes, that's right," Professor Flitwick beamed at Harry. "Professor McGonagall told me about the special circumstances." "What model is it, Potter?" "A Nimbus 2000, sir," Harry replied, fighting not to laugh at Malfoy's horror-struck expression. "And it's really thanks to Malfoy here that I got it." Harry and Ron headed upstairs, smothering laughter at Malfoy's obvious rage and confusion. "Well, it's true," Harry explained as they reached the top of the marble staircase. "If he hadn't stolen Neville's Remembrall, I wouldn't have gotten on the team." The events of the previous day's flying lesson had been unexpected. When Neville had fallen and broken his wrist, Madame Hooch had taken him to the hospital wing, warning everyone to stay grounded. Malfoy had seized Neville's Remembrall, a gift from his grandmother, and taken off on his broomstick, taunting the absent boy. Without thinking, Harry had mounted his own broom in pursuit, discovering to his amazement that flying came naturally to him. After an exhilarating chase and spectacular dive to catch the Remembrall Malfoy had thrown, he'd been spotted by Professor McGonagall. Instead of expulsion, however, she'd introduced him to Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, and arranged for Harry to become the team seeker, the youngest in a century. Now, unwrapping the Nimbus 2000 in the privacy of their dormitory, Harry contemplated this turn of events. On one hand, his position on the Quidditch team would provide status and connections beyond his year group. On the other hand, it made him more visible, potentially complicating his strategy of appearing average. Most troubling was McGonagall's involvement. The broomstick was clearly expensive. Was it a genuine reward for talent, or an attempt to ingratiate herself with the boy who lived? Either way, accepting such a gift created a sense of obligation Harry wasn't entirely comfortable with. "I'll never understand why McGonagall bent the rules for you," Ron marveled, admiring the gleaming broomstick. "She's usually so strict." "Maybe she has her reasons," Harry said noncommittally. That evening, Harry made his way to the Quidditch pitch for training with Wood. The burly fifth year was already waiting, a large wooden crate at his feet. "Ah, there you are, Potter," Wood greeted enthusiastically. "McGonagall's told me all about you. Quite a dive you pulled yesterday. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done better, and he could have played for England if he hadn't gone off chasing dragons." As Wood explained the rules of Quidditch, 7 players per team, 4 different balls, complex scoring, Harry found himself genuinely intrigued. The game sounded exciting, and the seeker position especially appealed to him, operating independently, focused on the tiny golden snitch while chaos unfolded around him. "You've got the build for a seeker too," Wood continued, circling Harry and examining him critically. "Light, speedy. We'll have to get you a decent broom." "Oh wait, McGonagall said you've already got a Nimbus 2000. "Yes," Harry confirmed, still curious about that. "Professor McGonagall ordered it for me. She's desperate to win the Quidditch Cup this year," Wood explained. "We haven't won since Charlie Weasley left, and Slytherin's taken it 6 years running. McGonagall's been nearly unbearable. Imagine what she'd be like if we finally beat them." That explained some of McGonagall's motivation, but Harry suspected there was more to it. Still, as he took to the air on his new broom, such concerns temporarily faded. Flying felt magical in a way no spell had yet matched, a perfect freedom he'd never known at the Dursleys. Wood released a bag of golf balls, which Harry caught one after another as they soared in different directions through the darkening sky. Not once did he miss, earning enthusiastic praise from the Quidditch captain. "That Quidditch Cup will have our name on it this year," Wood predicted as they finally headed back to the castle. "I wouldn't be surprised if you turn out better than Charlie Weasley, and that's saying something." Harry nodded politely, but his mind had returned to strategy. His natural flying ability would be difficult to downplay without seeming suspicious, and the visibility of Quidditch would make maintaining a low profile challenging. Perhaps he could turn it to his advantage, using the sport as a sanctioned outlet for exceptional talent while remaining deliberately average in more academic areas. As he entered the common room, still carrying his Nimbus 2000, a commotion near the portrait hole caught his attention. Hermione Granger appeared to be lecturing Ron about homework while he grew increasingly red-faced. "Don't understand how you can be so irresponsible about your education," she was saying. "The levitation charm Professor Flitwick mentioned will almost certainly be on our exams, and you haven't even, give it a rest, Hermione." Ron exploded. Not everyone wants to be a know-it-all bookworm with no friends. Hermione froze, her face crumpling momentarily before she gathered her books and fled up the girls' staircase. Harry, who had been observing Hermione as a potential ally, frowned at Ron. "That was a bit harsh," he commented as he joined his friend by the fire. "She's impossible," Ron grumbled. "Always nagging and showing off." "It's Leviosa, not Leviosah," he mimicked in a high-pitched voice. "No wonder no one can stand her." Harry considered this. Hermione was undeniably brilliant but lacking in social awareness. Her isolation made her both vulnerable and potentially valuable, someone without existing allegiances who might appreciate genuine friendship. "Maybe she just doesn't know how to make friends," Harry suggested. "Not everyone does naturally." Ron snorted. "Well, she's going about it all wrong." "I'm going to check on her," Harry decided, setting his broomstick aside. "Save my spot." "She went up the girls' staircase," Ron pointed out. "Boys can't go up there." "Then I'll ask Lavender or Parvati to check on her," Harry replied, spotting their fellow first-years across the common room. Neither girl seemed particularly concerned about Hermione's distress, but Parvati reluctantly agreed to deliver a message. Harry would be in the library tomorrow morning if Hermione wanted help with the practical portion of the levitation charm. "Why are you bothering?" Ron asked when Harry returned. "She's just going to lecture you about something else." "Because everyone needs friends," Harry said simply. "And I know what it's like to not have any." True to his word, Harry was in the library the following morning when Hermione cautiously approached his table. Her eyes were slightly red, suggesting she'd been crying. "Parvati said you wanted to see me," she said stiffly. "I thought we might practice the levitation charm together," Harry replied, gesturing to the feather he'd brought. "Two perspectives are usually better than one." Hermione hesitated, clearly suspicious of his motives. "You don't need help with levitation. I saw you levitate your ink pot in class yesterday." "Maybe I want your help with something else, then," Harry suggested. "Transfiguration, perhaps. You're the only one who made a proper needle on the first try." "Why?" Hermione asked bluntly. "Why are you being nice to me when everyone else thinks I'm an insufferable know-it-all?" Harry considered his answer carefully. Hermione was too intelligent for simple platitudes. "Because I think you're brilliant," he said honestly. "And because I know what it's like to be the outsider. Before Hogwarts, I didn't have friends either. My cousin made sure of that." Hermione's expression softened slightly. "Really?" "Really," Harry confirmed. "Besides, Ron shouldn't have spoken to you that way." He was frustrated, but that's no excuse. "He wasn't wrong, though, was he?" Hermione said quietly, sinking into the chair across from Harry. "I don't know how to talk to people without sounding bossy. My parents always encouraged me to be confident in my knowledge, but here it just makes everyone hate me." "Not everyone," Harry corrected. "I don't hate you. And neither does Ron, really. He's just Ron." A small smile tugged at Hermione's lips. "He is rather transparent in his emotions." "Exactly. Look, Hermione, you're the smartest witch in our year by far. But sometimes people need to figure things out themselves, even if it takes them longer. When you immediately tell everyone the correct answer, it makes them feel." He searched for the right word. "Stupid," she suggested. "Unnecessary," Harry corrected. Like they don't get the chance to contribute. Hermione considered this. I never thought of it that way. I just want to help. I know. And that's a good thing. Maybe you could try asking questions instead of giving answers. Like, have you considered this approach, instead of, you're doing it wrong. That actually makes sense, Hermione admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. My parents have suggested something similar before. Your parents sound wise, Harry smiled. Are they doctors? Healers, I mean. Dentists, actually, Hermione replied. They fix people's teeth. How did you know they were in medicine? Just a guess, Harry shrugged. You have that careful way of explaining things, like you're used to walking patients through procedures. Hermione looked pleased at this observation. That's very perceptive of you, Harry. They spent the next hour practicing spells and chatting about classes. Harry deliberately steered the conversation toward Hermione's background and knowledge, asking thoughtful questions that allowed her to share information without lecturing. By the time they left the library for lunch, Hermione was noticeably more relaxed. Thank you for this morning, she said as they approached the Great Hall. It was nice to talk to someone properly. Friends? Harry offered, extending his hand. Hermione beamed, shaking it firmly. Friends. Over the next few weeks, Harry continued his careful balancing act, excelling at Quidditch where visibility was unavoidable, performing adequately but not exceptionally in classes, and quietly building alliances with key individuals. Hermione gradually integrated into Harry and Ron's friendship circle, her bossy tendencies somewhat tempered by Harry's gentle guidance. Her encyclopedic knowledge proved invaluable for his research, though he was careful to frame his questions as general curiosity rather than revealing his true investigations. Neville, too, became a more frequent companion. The revelation about their family's connection had created a bond between them, and Harry made a point of partnering with Neville in herbology, where the boy's confidence blossomed alongside the magical plants. Even Ron, despite Harry's lingering suspicions about his family's connection to Dumbledore, proved to be a loyal friend. His strategic mind, revealed during intense chess matches in the common room, suggested potential that went deeper than his academic indifference might indicate. Harry's observations of the staff continued as well. Quirrell, the defense against the dark arts professor, presented a particular puzzle. The man's extreme nervousness and garlic-reeking turban seemed almost performative, and Harry occasionally felt the same strange pain in his scar during Quirrell's classes that he'd experienced when looking at Snape. As for Dumbledore himself, the headmaster maintained a careful distance, appearing only at meals and school-wide events. Occasionally, Harry would feel those twinkling blue eyes upon him, but direct interactions remained minimal, suggesting either confidence that his plans for Harry were proceeding smoothly or reluctance to engage too directly with his victim. It was during this period that Harry experienced the first unmistakable manifestation of his unique magical inheritance. The incident occurred during a particularly grueling Quidditch practice session. Wood had been driving the team relentlessly in preparation for their upcoming match against Slytherin, keeping them flying until well after sunset. As Harry circled high above the pitch, searching for the practice snitch in near darkness, he noticed something unusual at the forest's edge. A cloaked figure was moving swiftly across the grounds toward the Forbidden Forest. Even from a distance, Harry recognized the distinctive limping gait of Professor Snape. The potions master looked furtively over his shoulder before disappearing into the trees. Curious, Harry angled his broom downward for a closer look. Without consciously deciding to follow, he found himself flying silently above the forest canopy, tracking movement below through gaps in the leaves. A strange awareness guided him. Somehow he could sense Snape's location despite the darkness and dense foliage. In a small clearing ahead, Snape had stopped to meet someone, Professor Quirrell, whose stutter was audible even from Harry's elevated position. "Don't know why UW wanted TT to meet here of all places, Severus." "Oh, I thought we'd keep this private," Snape's voice replied, ice cold. "Students aren't supposed to know about the Philosopher's Stone, after all." Harry froze on his broom, the name triggering immediate recognition. Nicholas Flamel, one of his inherited house titles, was famous for creating the Philosopher's Stone, an object capable of transforming metal into gold and producing the elixir of life that granted immortality. Quirrell was mumbling something, but Snape interrupted. "Have you found out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's yet?" But Severus, you don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell." Snape took a step toward the trembling professor. I don't know what you know perfectly well what I mean. Your little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting. But I don't." "Very well," Snape cut in. "We'll have another little chat soon, when you've had time to think things over and decided where your loyalties lie." He threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. Quirrell remained frozen in place, terror evident even from a distance. Harry's instinct was to retreat before being discovered, but as he turned his broom, a strange sensation washed over him. The forest below suddenly appeared different, glowing lines of magical energy became visible, pulsing through the ground like a network of luminous roots. Most surprising was a golden thread that seemed to connect directly to him, stretching from his chest toward the castle. Startled, Harry nearly lost his grip on his broom. The moment his concentration broke, the vision faded, returning the forest to ordinary darkness. He blinked rapidly, wondering if he'd imagined it. Shaking his head, Harry flew back to the Quidditch pitch, where Wood was finally dismissing the team. He joined his teammates in the locker room, mind racing with questions about what he'd witnessed, both the conversation between the professors and the strange magical vision that followed. That night, after ensuring his dorm mates were asleep, Harry retrieved Bloodfang's book on magical inheritance and turned to the section on House Ravenclaw. There, he found a passage that made his heart race. The Ravenclaw lineage carries an unusual magical sensitivity sometimes called the Eagle's Eye. Descendants with this gift can perceive magical currents and bonds that remain invisible to others, particularly those connected to places of magical significance. This ability typically manifests in moments of heightened awareness or danger. Harry closed the book, excitement mingling with caution. If this was indeed a manifestation of his Ravenclaw inheritance, it could prove invaluable, but only if he learned to control it. More immediately, however, the information he'd overheard demanded attention. The Philosopher's Stone was at Hogwarts, hidden somewhere beyond a beast of Hagrid's. This must be what Hagrid had retrieved from Gringotts on Harry's birthday, the object sought by the would-be thief. But why was Snape questioning Quirrell about it? Was he trying to steal it himself, or protect it from the seemingly harmless defense professor? And more importantly, how did this connect to Nicholas Flamel, whose house Harry had somehow inherited by oath? The following day, Harry made a careful approach to Hermione in the library. "Hermione, have you ever heard of Nicholas Flamel?" She looked up from her charms essay, brow furrowed in concentration. "The name sounds familiar. I think I've read it somewhere." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Harry shrugged. "I found his name on a chocolate frog card, something about working with Dumbledore on alchemy." "That's it!" Hermione exclaimed, earning a sharp look from Madame Pants. "Sorry," she whispered, then continued more quietly, "he's an alchemist. I can't remember exactly what he's famous for, though. Could you help me find out?" Harry asked. "It's for a personal project." Hermione's eyes lit up at the prospect of research. "Of course. I love a good research challenge. I'll check the alchemy section after I finish this essay." "Thanks," Harry smiled, relieved that Hermione hadn't questioned his interest too deeply. Over the next several days, their research yielded limited results until Hermione burst into the common room one evening, lugging an enormous old book. "I checked this out weeks ago for a bit of light reading," she explained breathlessly as she slammed it down on the table between Harry and Ron. "Light?" Ron questioned, but Hermione ignored him, flipping pages frantically. "Here it is," she whispered triumphantly. "Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone." "The what?" Ron asked, while Harry feigned confusion despite his existing knowledge. "Honestly, don't you two read? Look, right here, the ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the philosopher's stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. Immortal? Ron's eyes widened. It means you'll never die, Hermione explained. I know what it means. Ron snapped. The only stone currently in existence, Hermione continued, reading from the book, belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year. Harry let this information sink in. Flamel was over 600 years old, and somehow Harry had inherited a connection to his house. Was the oath mentioned in the inheritance test related to the philosopher's stone itself? No wonder Snape's after it, Ron whispered. Anyone would want it. But why bring it to Hogwarts? Hermione wondered. It seems dangerous to keep something so valuable in a school. Maybe it wasn't safe at Gringotts anymore, Harry suggested, thinking of the break-in. Dumbledore is supposed to be the only wizard Voldemort ever feared, perhaps Flamel trusted him to protect it. Ron and Hermione flinched at Voldemort's name, but Harry pressed on. We should find out more about the protections around it. Hagrid mentioned a three-headed dog guarding a trapdoor when he was, not entirely sober last week. Harry. Hermione looked scandalized. You're not thinking of trying to find the stone, are you? That would be incredibly dangerous and against about 100 school rules. Of course not, Harry assured her. I just want to make sure it's properly protected. If Snape is trying to steal it, we should tell Dumbledore, Hermione insisted. With what proof? Harry countered. All we have is a conversation I overheard. Besides, Dumbledore probably already has his suspicions. Ron nodded. Dumbledore wouldn't hire Snape if he didn't trust him, weird as that seems. Exactly, Harry agreed, though privately he considered Dumbledore's judgment highly suspect given the man's theft from Harry's vaults. Let's just keep our eyes open for now. As Halloween approached, Harry found himself increasingly preoccupied with thoughts of his parents. The anniversary of their deaths had always passed unmarked at the Dursleys, but in the wizarding world, where the night Voldemort fell was celebrated as a holiday, Harry felt the loss more acutely than ever. On Halloween morning, the delicious smell of baking pumpkin filled the corridors, but Harry moved through the day in a somber mood that his friends noticed but respectfully didn't question. During Charms class, Professor Flitwick announced they were ready to attempt making objects fly, the levitation charm Hermione had mastered weeks ago. The class was paired off, with Harry working with Neville while Ron was unfortunately partnered with Hermione. Now, don't forget that nice wrist movement we've been practicing. Professor Flitwick squeaked. Swish and flick, remember, swish and flick. And saying the magic words properly is very important, too. Harry helped Neville with his wand grip, noticing from the corner of his eye that Ron and Hermione were already bickering. He sighed, wishing his friends could find common ground more easily. By the end of class, only Hermione had successfully levitated her feather, earning praise from Professor Flitwick and a scowl from Ron. Harry had deliberately held back, helping Neville achieve a slight flutter while pretending to struggle himself. As they left the classroom, Ron was in a foul mood. It's no wonder no one can stand her, he said to Harry as they pushed their way into the crowded corridor. She's a nightmare, honestly. Someone knocked into Harry as they hurried past. It was Hermione, and Harry caught a glimpse of her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. I think she heard you, Harry said quietly. So? Ron looked uncomfortable but defensive. She must have noticed she's got no friends. She does have friends, Harry corrected firmly. She has us, or at least, she has me. Ron's ears reddened. Come on, Harry. She's impossible. No, she's brilliant and lonely and trying too hard, Harry replied. And now she's upset on Halloween, which isn't exactly a happy day for me either. Without waiting for a response, Harry turned and headed in the direction Hermione had gone. He found her in a girl's bathroom after getting directions from Parvati Patil. Knocking gently on the door, he called out, "Hermione. It's Harry. Can I talk to you?" "Go away," came her tearful voice from inside. "I'm not leaving until I know you're okay," Harry insisted. Ron was wrong to say that, and he knows it. He's just too stubborn to admit it. After a moment of silence, the door cracked open. Hermione's tear-stained face appeared. "You shouldn't be here. This is a girl's bathroom." "Technically I'm still in the corridor," Harry pointed out with a small smile. "Look, I know what it's like when people say cruel things about you. I dealt with it my whole life at the Dursleys. It hurts, but it doesn't make it true." Hermione wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "Why are you being so nice to me?" "Because you're my friend," Harry said simply. "And because today is already hard enough without adding more sadness to it." Understanding dawned in Hermione's eyes. "Oh, Harry, Halloween. It's when your parents—" He nodded, not trusting himself to speak about it. Hermione stepped out of the bathroom. "I'm sorry I've been so self-absorbed. I didn't even think about what today means for you." "It's okay," Harry assured her. "Most people are celebrating without realizing. But maybe we could both use a friend right now. Will you come to the feast?" Hermione hesitated. "I don't think I'm ready to face Ron yet." "Fair enough. Want to go to the library instead? We could continue researching Flamel." "Actually," Hermione said with a watery smile, "I think I'd like to hear about your parents, if you don't mind talking about them. Not how they died, but who they were." Harry was taken aback by the request. No one had ever asked him about James and Lily Potter as people rather than victims or martyrs. "I don't know much," he admitted. "Just bits and pieces from Hagrid and what Professor McGonagall has mentioned." "Then perhaps we could find out together," Hermione suggested. "The library must have old school records, maybe even yearbooks or award listings." The idea of researching his own parents had never occurred to Harry. His chest tightened with unexpected emotion. "I'd like that," he said quietly. They spent the afternoon in a quiet corner of the library, digging through old Hogwarts records. Hermione's methodical research skills proved invaluable as they discovered James Potter had been Quidditch captain and head boy in his final year, while Lily Evans had been a prefect renowned for her charm work and potions brewing. "Look at this," Hermione whispered excitedly, pointing to a faded photograph in a showcase of academic achievement. "Your mother won the Slughorn Prize for innovative potion making in her 6th year. The citation says her modifications to the blood-replenishing potion are still used at St. Mungo's Hospital." Harry stared at the picture of his mother, 17 years old, red hair gleaming, green eyes, just like his, bright with pride as she accepted a small crystal vial from a walrus-mustached professor. "I had no idea," he murmured. "No one ever told me she was brilliant at potions." "And look here," Hermione continued, flipping to another page. "Your father and his friends, they called themselves the Marauders apparently, received the most attentions in Hogwarts history, but he also won a special commendation for transfiguration innovation in his 7th year." As dinner time approached, Harry felt both emotionally drained and strangely fulfilled. The ache of his parents' absence remained, but it was now accompanied by a more concrete sense of who they had been, talented, respected, and fully dimensional people rather than just tragic figures. "Thank you for this," he told Hermione as they finally left the library. "It means more than I can say." "What are friends for?" she replied with a genuine smile. "Should we head to the feast? I'm actually feeling hungry now." Harry nodded, but as they descended the stairs toward the great hall, a foul stench reached their nostrils, a mixture of old socks and unwashed public toilet. And then they heard it, a low grunting and the shuffling of enormous feet. At the end of the passage, something huge was moving toward them. As it emerged into a patch of moonlight, they realized with horror what it was, a 12-foot mountain troll, granite gray and lumpy, dragging a massive wooden club. "Run!" Harry whispered urgently, pulling Hermione backward. The troll stopped beside an open doorway and peered inside, waggling its long ears indecisively before slouching into the room. "The key's in the lock," Harry muttered. "We could lock it in." "Good idea," Hermione agreed, her face pale with fear. They edged toward the door, and with one swift movement, Harry grabbed the key, slammed the door, and turned the key in the lock. Flushed with their success, they started to run back the way they had come, only to freeze at a high, petrified scream from the very room they'd just locked. "Oh no," Hermione gasped, suddenly white as a ghost. "That's the girls' bathroom." "Is someone in there?" Harry asked, already knowing the awful answer. "Probably a first year who didn't come to the feast," Hermione moaned. "We have to help them." Without hesitation, Harry turned and sprinted back to the door, fumbling with the key. As they burst in, they saw a terrified Lavender Brown shrinking against the opposite wall, looking as though she was about to faint. The troll was advancing on her, knocking sinks off the walls as it went. "Confuse it," Harry called desperately to Hermione. He seized a tap and threw it against the wall. The troll stopped a few feet from Lavender, turning its dull gaze toward the noise. It hesitated, then lumbered toward Harry instead, lifting its club. "Oi, P-Brain," came Ron's voice from the doorway as he threw a metal pipe at the troll's shoulder. The creature didn't seem to notice the pipe hitting it, but it heard Ron's shout and paused again, turning toward this new threat. "Get Lavender out." Harry yelled to Hermione, who nodded and darted around the troll, helping the sobbing girl toward the exit. The momentary distraction cost Harry. The troll roared and swung its club wildly, forcing him to dive under a sink to avoid being crushed. The porcelain fixture shattered above him, spraying debris as water gushed from broken pipes. "Harry!" Ron shouted in alarm. As Harry scrambled away from the troll's next swing, something strange happened. Time seemed to slow, and that same golden thread he'd glimpsed in the forest appeared, this time connecting him not just to the castle but to the very ground beneath the troll. Without thinking, Harry thrust his hand toward the puddle forming from the broken sink and felt a surge of magic rush through him. "Congelatio," he shouted, a spell he'd never learned but somehow knew. The water beneath the troll instantly froze. The creature's feet slipped on the sudden ice, sending its massive body crashing to the floor with an impact that shook the entire bathroom. Ron stood gaping at the fallen troll. "Bloody hell, Harry! What was that?" Before Harry could answer, footsteps thundered in the corridor outside. A moment later, Professor McGonagall burst into the bathroom, followed closely by Snape and Quirrell. Quirrell took one look at the troll, let out a faint whimper, and sat quickly on a toilet, clutching his heart. Snape bent over the troll, while McGonagall fixed Harry and Ron with a furious stare. "What on earth were you thinking?" she demanded, cold fury in her voice. "You're lucky you weren't killed. Why aren't you in your dormitories?" Snape gave Harry a swift, piercing look that made him distinctly uncomfortable. Had the professor recognized the unusual magic Harry had performed? "Please, Professor McGonagall," came a small voice from the doorway. Hermione had returned with Lavender, who was still trembling but appeared unharmed. "They were looking for me. I went looking for the troll because I thought I could deal with it on my own, because I've read all about them." Harry stared at Hermione. She was lying to a teacher to protect them. "Miss Granger." McGonagall looked stunned. "If they hadn't found me, Lavender and I would be dead now," Hermione continued. Harry distracted it while Ron helped Lavender escape. "They didn't have time to fetch anyone. It was about to finish me off when they arrived." "Well, in that case." Professor McGonagall seemed torn between disbelief and reluctant approval. "Miss Granger, how could you think of tackling a mountain troll on your own? 5 points will be taken from Gryffindor for this serious lack of judgment." Hermione hung her head, the perfect picture of remorse. "As for you two gentlemen," McGonagall continued, turning to Harry and Ron, "few first years could have taken on a full-grown mountain troll. 5 points will be awarded to each of you." For sheer dumb luck. Ron grinned weakly, but Harry's mind was elsewhere, focused on the inexplicable magic he'd just performed. That spell hadn't been in any of their textbooks, nor had he ever practiced it. Yet somehow, in that moment of danger, it had come to him naturally. "Professor," Snape spoke quietly, examining the frozen puddle beneath the troll, "might I ask what spell was used to incapacitate the creature?" All eyes turned to Harry, who hesitated. Should he admit to casting advanced magic he shouldn't know? Or lie and risk being caught? It was a simple freezing charm, Hermione interjected before Harry could respond. "We learned it in our independent study group. I've been teaching Harry and Ron some additional spells from the Standard Book of Spells, Grade 2. Snape's eyes narrowed in obvious skepticism, but McGonagall merely looked impressed. "Extra studying already, Miss Granger?" "Perhaps I was hasty in deducting those points." "Well, off you go, all of you, straight to your dormitories. Students are finishing the feast in their houses." As they climbed the stairs toward Gryffindor Tower, Ron turned to Hermione with newfound respect. "Thanks for getting us out of trouble like that. Mind explaining what actually happened back there?" she whispered to Harry. "That wasn't a standard freezing charm, I've never seen anything like it." Harry glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "I'm not entirely sure myself. It just came to me." "Well, whatever it was," Ron interjected, "it was brilliant. That troll never stood a chance." They had reached the portrait of the fat lady. "Pig snout," they said and entered. The common room was packed and noisy. Everyone was eating the food that had been sent up from the feast. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, however, found a quiet corner to talk. "What really happened, Harry?" Hermione pressed once they were seated. "That spell, Congelatio, isn't in any of our textbooks. I would remember." Harry decided honesty was his best option, at least a version of it. "I think it might have been accidental magic," he said carefully. "Like what happens before we get proper training. I was scared, and it just happened." "Accidental magic doesn't usually have incantations," Hermione pointed out. "You clearly said Congelatio." "Maybe I've read it somewhere and remembered it subconsciously," Harry suggested. Ron shrugged, already loading a plate with food. "However you did it, I'm just glad you did. Not everyone takes down a mountain troll their first year at Hogwarts." "True," Hermione agreed, though she still looked thoughtful. "It certainly makes for a memorable Halloween." Harry nodded, relieved when the conversation shifted to speculation about how the troll had gotten into the castle in the first place. Privately, he resolved to research the spell he'd cast, and the strange golden threads he'd now seen twice. The inheritance of House Hufflepuff, according to Bloodfang's texts, included a special affinity for elemental magic, particularly involving earth. Had he unconsciously tapped into that ability when facing the troll? And if so, what other inherited powers might manifest in moments of need? The next morning, Harry woke early and slipped out of the dormitory before his roommates stirred. In the deserted common room, he drafted a carefully coded letter to Bloodfang. "Dear Uncle Ragnarok, school is going well, though eventful. Last night, I experienced an unusual magical occurrence during an emergency. I instinctively performed magic beyond my current education, specifically controlling water and ice with unexpected precision. Prior to this, I had a strange visual experience where I could see magical energy flowing through the grounds of the school. Could these be manifestations of the family gifts you mentioned in our discussions? If so, any guidance on controlling and developing them would be appreciated. On another note, I've learned that a valuable artifact created by NF is currently housed in the school. Given our family's past connection to him, I wonder if this is relevant to our ongoing discussions about my inheritance. The legal matters we previously discussed should continue as planned. I believe the timing we agreed upon remains optimal. Your nephew, H." After sealing the letter, Harry made his way to the Ollery, where Hedwig greeted him with an affectionate nip. He stroked her feathers gently as he attached the message. "Take this directly to Bloodfang at Gringotts," he instructed quietly. No stops, and return only when you're not being watched. Hedwig hooted softly in understanding and took off through one of the high windows, her white form soon disappearing against the pale morning sky. As November arrived, bringing bitter cold to the grounds, Harry found himself increasingly busy. Between Quidditch practice, classes, research into his magical inheritance, and maintaining his carefully cultivated friendships, he had little time to dwell on the upcoming match against Slytherin, his first official game. The morning of the match dawned bright but cold. The great hall buzzed with excitement as Harry picked at his breakfast, stomach too knotted for food. You need to eat something, Hermione insisted, pushing a plate of toast toward him. I'm not hungry, Harry replied. Just a bit of toast, she pressed. You'll need your strength. Reluctantly, Harry took a slice and forced himself to take a small bite. As he did, he noticed Snape limping past their table, a pronounced grimace on his face with each step. Recalling the night of the troll incident, Harry wondered if the potions master's injury was connected to the forbidden corridor and whatever lay beyond the trapdoor. Before he could share this observation with his friends, Oliver Wood called for the Gryffindor team to head down to the pitch for final preparations. Harry rose, his toast forgotten, and followed his teammates out of the castle. In the locker room, Wood gave an impassioned speech about their chances against Slytherin, though Harry barely heard it through his own churning thoughts. Not only was this his first real Quidditch match, but it would be played before the entire school, including Dumbledore. Maintaining his strategy of controlled visibility would be challenging on such a public stage. Potter, Wood said finally, turning to Harry, just catch the snitch as quickly as possible. End this before Slytherin's superior brooms give them too much of an advantage. Harry nodded, gripping his Nimbus 2000 tightly. At least in flying, he didn't need to hold back. It was the one area where his natural talent could shine without raising unwanted questions. As they walked onto the pitch to thunderous applause, Harry spotted a banner in the stands. Potter for President flashed in different colors over a drawing of a lion. The sight warmed him despite his nervousness, genuine support, not connected to his fame or Dumbledore's machinations. Madame Hooch, who was refereeing, stood in the center of the field waiting for the two teams. Now, I want a nice fair game, all of you, she said once they were gathered around her. Harry noticed she seemed to be speaking particularly to the Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, a sixth year with distinctly troll-like features. Mount your brooms, please. Harry climbed onto his Nimbus 2000, heart pounding in anticipation. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her silver whistle, and 15 brooms rose into the air. The game had begun. And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive, too, Jordan. Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the magical megaphone. Sorry, Professor, said Lee Jordan, the Weasley twins' friend who was providing commentary. And she's really belting along up there, a neat pass to Alicia Spinnet, back to Johnson and, no, the Slytherins have taken the quaffle. Harry tuned out the commentary, focusing instead on scanning the pitch for any glint of gold. The Slytherin seeker, Terence Higgs, was marking him closely, apparently under instructions to follow rather than search independently. The game progressed brutally below, with Slytherin taking the lead through increasingly dirty tactics. Twice Harry spotted the snitch, only to lose it amid the chaos of players and bludgers. As he circled higher for a better vantage point, his broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, Harry thought he was going to fall. He gripped the handle tightly with both hands and knees, but the broom lurched again, as though trying to buck him off. Harry had never experienced anything like it. The Nimbus 2000 was vibrating so hard it was nearly impossible to hold on. Lee's commentary continued below, oblivious to Harry's predicament as the broom began zigzagging through the air, making violent swishing movements that jerked him back and forth. Slytherin in possession, Flint with the quaffle, passes Spinnet, passes Bell, hit hard in the face by a bludger, hope it broke his nose, only joking, Professor, Slytherin score. No one seemed to have noticed that Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher, away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. Suddenly, people throughout the stands were pointing up at Harry. His broom had started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. Then the whole crowd gasped, the nimbus had given a wild jerk, and Harry was dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him? Seamus Finnegan whispered. Can't have, Hagrid's voice replied, his binoculars trained on Harry. Can't nothing interfere with a broomstick except powerful dark magic? No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars and scanned the crowd frantically. A moment later, she was pushing through the stands toward the teachers' section, not even stopping to apologize as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front of him. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few words. Blue flames shot from her wand onto the hem of Snape's robes. Up in the air, Harry suddenly felt his broom stop vibrating. Taking advantage of the reprieve, he swung himself back aboard and sped toward the ground, only to clap his hand to his mouth as if he was about to be sick. He hit the field on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his palm. I've got the snitch, he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. 20 minutes later, Harry was being ushered into Hagrid's hut along with Ron and Hermione for a calming cup of tea. It was Snape, Ron was explaining. Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering, not taking his eyes off you. Rubbish, said Hagrid, pouring boiling water into a large teapot. Why would Snape do something like that? Harry exchanged glances with his friends. Should they tell Hagrid their suspicions? We found out something about him, he said finally. He tried to get past that three-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him. We think he's trying to steal whatever it's guarding. Hagrid dropped the teapot with a crash. How do you know about Fluffy? He demanded. Fluffy? That thing has a name. Ron asked incredulously. Course he does, he's mine, said Hagrid proudly. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard he caught himself. Now, don't ask me any more. That's top secret, that is. But Snape's trying to steal it, Hermione insisted. Codswallop, Hagrid dismissed. Professor Snape is a Hogwarts teacher. Then why did he just try to kill Harry? Hermione demanded. I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking. I'm tellin', yeah, you're wrong. Hagrid insisted hotly. I don't know why Harry's broom acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try and kill a student. Now, listen to me, all three of ya, you're meddlin' in things that don't concern ya. It's dangerous. You forget that dog, and you forget what it's guardin'. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel, aha. Harry exclaimed. So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there? Hagrid looked furious with himself. As they walked back to the castle, Harry considered everything they'd learned. The Philosopher's Stone was hidden in the school, guarded by enchantments from various professors, including at least, Fluffy. Snape, or possibly Quirrell, given Harry's suspicions, wanted to steal it. And somehow this connected to Harry's own inheritance through House Flamel. Bloodfang's reply to his letter had arrived that morning. Dear nephew, your experiences suggest the awakening of bloodline gifts. The visual phenomenon aligns with Ravenclaw's Eagle's Eye, while the elemental control indicates Hufflepuff's Earth affinity. Both typically manifest in moments of necessity or heightened emotion. Training these abilities requires patience and meditation. I've enclosed instructions for exercises that may help develop control. Practice only in private, such unusual talents would draw unwanted attention. Regarding NF, this connection is indeed significant. The oath binding your inheritance likely relates to an ancient pact between your ancestors and his house. If his creation is at your school, you have a legitimate claim to involvement in its protection. Exercise caution, however, as asserting this claim prematurely could expose your knowledge of your inheritance. Legal proceedings continue as planned. The winter holidays will bring developments. Your uncle, or the letter had included detailed instructions for meditation techniques designed to help Harry access and control his inherited abilities. He'd begun practicing each night before sleep, focusing on the sensation he'd experienced when seeing the magical energies. Progress was slow but tangible. Occasionally, he could summon brief glimpses of the golden threads connecting him to the castle, strongest near Gryffindor Tower but present throughout Hogwarts. Once, during History of Magic, he'd accidentally triggered the vision and noticed faint silver threads connecting various students to each other, bonds of friendship, perhaps, or magical affinities. Most intriguing was his growing sensitivity to the castle itself. When completely relaxed, Harry could feel Hogwarts as a semi-sentient entity, ancient, benevolent, and somehow recognizing him as an heir to its founders. Doors sometimes opened for him before he touched them, staircases shifted to create convenient paths, and even the notoriously temperamental suits of armor stood at attention when he passed. These subtle changes hadn't gone unnoticed by his friends. "How do you always know the way?" Ron complained one afternoon as Harry confidently led them through a series of passages they'd never used before, emerging exactly where they needed to be for transfiguration. "It's like the castle talks to you or something." "Just good spatial memory," Harry replied with a shrug, though Hermione's calculating gaze suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. As November transitioned to December and the castle grounds disappeared beneath several feet of snow, Harry's thoughts turned to the approaching holidays. Most students would return home for Christmas, but Harry had immediately signed up to stay at Hogwarts, not just to avoid the Dursleys, but because the emptier castle would provide opportunities to research more freely. To his surprise, Ron had also elected to stay, as his parents were visiting his brother Charlie in Romania. Hermione, however, would be going home to her parents. "You have to keep looking for information on Flamel while I'm gone," she instructed as she packed her trunk. "And use the library time to practice those meditation exercises you've been doing. They're clearly helping your concentration in class." Harry smiled at her perceptiveness. He hadn't told her the true purpose of his meditation, but Hermione had noticed its effects on his magical performance. "I will," he promised. "And you try to enjoy the break without worrying about us or schoolwork." Hermione snorted. "Not likely, but I'll try." The day before students departed for the holidays, an unexpected package arrived for Harry during breakfast. The long, thin box was carried by 6 screech owls and came with a note, for services to the school regarding the troll incident. Use it wisely and discreetly. "A friend, what is it?" Ron asked, eyeing the package curiously. "Not sure," Harry replied, though the shape and weight gave him a good idea. "Let's open it in the dormitory." Away from prying eyes, Harry carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a silvery, fluid-like fabric that slithered through his fingers like water woven into material. "Is that what I think it is?" Ron gasped, dropping the sweets he'd been munching. "If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable." "What is it?" Harry asked, though Bloodfang's description of a missing Potter family heirloom had already given him a strong suspicion. "It's an invisibility cloak." Ron confirmed, a look of awe on his face. "Try it on." Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders, and Ron gave a yell. "It is." "Look down." Harry looked down at his feet, or where his feet should have been. They were gone. He rushed to the mirror and sure enough, his reflection showed only his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. "There's a note," Ron said suddenly, picking up a small card that had fallen from the folds of the cloak. "It says, your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well." Harry stared at the flowing handwriting, his excitement turning to suspicion. The note was unsigned, but the handwriting matched the elegant script he'd seen on Dumbledore's welcome speech at the start of term. So Dumbledore had possessed his family's invisibility cloak all these years, the very heirloom blood Fong had specifically mentioned as missing from the Potter vault. Why return it now? Was it a genuine gesture of goodwill, or another calculated move in whatever game the headmaster was playing? Wow, Ron breathed, oblivious to Harry's inner conflict. I'd give anything for one of these. Anything. Harry carefully folded the cloak, his mind racing with possibilities. Whatever Dumbledore's motivation for returning it, the cloak would prove invaluable for exploring the castle undetected. Ron, he said slowly, I think our holiday just got a lot more interesting. Christmas morning dawned cold and white. Harry woke to Ron's excited voice. Wake up. Presents. Harry sat up and squinted through the semi-darkness toward the foot of his bed, where a small pile of packages had appeared overnight. This was unexpected. At the Dursleys, his Christmas gifts had typically been items like old socks or wire hangers. Happy Christmas, said Ron sleepily as Harry scrambled out of bed. You too, Harry replied. I didn't expect, these are for me. What did you expect, turnips? Ron laughed, turning to his own much larger pile. Harry picked up the top parcel, wrapped in thick brown paper and scrawled with, to Harry, from Hagrid. Inside was a roughly cut wooden flute that Hagrid had obviously whittled himself. When Harry blew it, it sounded like an owl. The second parcel, very small and light, contained a note, we received your message and enclose your Christmas present. From Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. Taped to the note was a 50-pence piece. That's friendly, said Harry, amused rather than offended. It was 50 pence more than he'd expected. Ron was fascinated by the Muggle coin, and Harry happily gave it to him. From Hermione, he'd received a large box of chocolate frogs. The next gift contained a hand-knitted sweater in emerald green, to match your eyes, said the accompanying note, and a large box of homemade fudge, both from Mrs. Weasley. Harry was touched by the gesture, though it raised questions about the Weasleys' relationship with Dumbledore and their interest in him. There was only one parcel left. Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it and something fluid and golden slid onto his bed, a delicate chain supporting a small hourglass pendant surrounded by a circular gold frame. Blimey, Ron whispered, staring at it. That's a time-turner. A what? Harry asked, picking up the note that had fallen with it. This belonged to your mother during her final year at Hogwarts. She used it to attend additional classes and research projects while maintaining her head girl duties. Use it with extreme caution, tampering with time has consequences. No more than 5 hours per use, and you must not be seen by your past self. A true ally. Unlike the note with the invisibility cloak, this handwriting was sharp and precise, almost severe in its neatness. A time-turner lets you go back in time, Ron explained, his voice hushed with awe. They're incredibly rare, the Ministry controls them all. My dad mentioned them once. Who sent it to you? I don't know, Harry replied truthfully, examining the unsigned note again. It says it was my mother's. Whoever sent it must trust you a lot, Ron said. Those things are really dangerous in the wrong hands. You could change history. Harry carefully placed the time-turner in his trunk, his mind whirling with implications. Unlike the invisibility cloak, this gift didn't seem to be from Dumbledore, the handwriting was entirely different, and the tone suggested someone positioning themselves as an ally against the headmaster's influence. But who? McGonagall was a possibility, her writing on their essays had a similar sharpness. But would she defy Dumbledore by returning a powerful magical object to Harry? And how had she obtained something that belonged to his mother? Harry resolved to research time-turners thoroughly before attempting to use one. For now, the invisibility cloak offered plenty of exploratory potential. That night, after a Christmas feast and an evening of wizard chess with Ron, who thoroughly trounced him, Harry waited until his friend's snores filled the dormitory before slipping out of bed. He pulled the invisibility cloak from his trunk and wrapped it around himself, feeling a thrill of excitement as he disappeared from view. The castle was different at night, silent and mysterious, the corridors bathed in silvery moonlight. Harry wandered freely, testing the limits of the cloak's protection. Even Mrs. Norris, Filch's unervingly perceptive cat, looked right through him when they crossed paths on the third floor. Eventually, Harry found himself drawn to the library's restricted section. Here, perhaps, he might find information on Nicholas Flamel or insights into his unusual magical inheritance. The restricted section lay at the back of the library, roped off from the main collection. Harry stepped carefully over the rope and held his wand aloft, casting a dim light across the titles. Many were in languages he didn't recognize, while others had no titles at all. Some books appeared to be stained with what looked disturbingly like blood, and one emitted a faint whispering that raised the hairs on Harry's neck. He selected a large black and silver volume that caught his eye, carefully pulling it from the shelf. As he opened it, a piercing, blood-curdling shriek split the silence. The book was screaming. Harry snapped it shut, but the shriek went on and on, a single high-pitched note. He stumbled backward, knocking over his lamp, which promptly went out. Panicking, he shoved the book back on the shelf and ran for it, passing Filch in the doorway as the caretaker shouted, "Who's there?" Heart pounding, Harry fled down a corridor, not paying attention to where he was going until he realized he'd reached an unfamiliar part of the castle. Slowing to catch his breath, he noticed a door standing ajar nearby. Without hesitation, he slipped inside and closed it behind him, listening for pursuing footsteps. The room appeared to be an unused classroom. Desks and chairs were piled against the walls, and there was an upturned wastepaper basket. But propped against the wall facing him was something that didn't look as if it belonged there, a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame, standing on two clawed feet. An inscription was carved around the top, "Erist stra eru oit ube kafru oit onwosi." Curious, Harry approached the mirror, and had to clap his hand to his mouth to stop himself from screaming. For in the mirror, he was not alone. A crowd of people stood behind him. But the room was empty. Breathing rapidly, Harry turned around, but there was no one there. He looked back at the mirror, and there they were, reflected beside him. Looking more closely, Harry realized the two figures directly behind him were a man and woman. The man was tall and thin with untidy black hair and glasses, just like Harry's. And the woman, she had dark red hair and her eyes were just like his, bright green and exactly the same shape. "Mom," he whispered. "Dad?" They smiled at him, and the woman nodded, tears in her eyes. Other figures crowded around them, an elderly couple with the man's noble knees, a dignified-looking woman with the same red hair as his mother, a tall, aristocratic man with the black family features Harry recognized from Bloodfang's books. His family. His inheritance. The people who should have surrounded him all his life, not just as names on a parchment inheritance test, but as loving relatives. Harry sank to the floor before the mirror, unable to tear his eyes away. How long he sat there, he didn't know, but eventually, a distant noise brought him back to his senses. He couldn't stay all night, he had to return to the dormitory. "I'll come back," he whispered to the figures in the mirror. "I promise." And return he did, the following night, bringing Ron with him. Strangely, Ron didn't see Harry's family in the mirror. Instead, he saw himself as head boy and Quidditch captain, holding both the house cup and the Quidditch cup. "Do you think this mirror shows the future?" Ron asked excitedly. "How can it?" Harry replied, thinking of his dead parents. "My family is gone." On the third night, Harry went alone, determined to spend more time with the family he'd never known. But as he settled before the mirror, a voice spoke from the shadows. "Back again, Harry." He jumped to his feet, his heart racing. Sitting on one of the desks by the wall was Albus Dumbledore himself. Harry had been so eager to reach the mirror, he hadn't noticed the headmaster's presence. I didn't see you, sir." "Strange how nearsighted being invisible can make you," said Dumbledore, smiling gently. "So, you, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erist." "I didn't know it was called that, sir." "But I expect you've realized by now what it does." Harry hesitated. It shows me my family. And it showed your friend Ron himself as head boy. How did you know? I don't need a cloak to become invisible, said Dumbledore. Now, can you think what the Mirror of Erised shows us all? Harry shook his head, though inwardly he was disturbed by the confirmation that Dumbledore had been monitoring his nighttime excursions. Had the headmaster deliberately left the cloak where it would lead to this encounter? Let me explain, Dumbledore continued. The happiest man on earth would be able to use the Mirror of Erised like a normal mirror, that is, he would look into it and see himself exactly as he is. Does that help? Harry thought carefully. It shows us what we want, whatever we want. Yes and no, said Dumbledore quietly. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. Ronald Weasley, who has always been overshadowed by his brothers, sees himself standing alone, the best of all of them. Dumbledore's analysis seemed accurate on the surface, but Harry wondered if the mirror revealed something deeper about his inheritance, not just his parents, but the complex network of magical bloodlines now flowing through him. Could Dumbledore see that in the reflection? Was this another test? The mirror will be moved to a new home tomorrow, Harry, Dumbledore continued, and I ask you not to go looking for it again. If you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, remember that. Harry nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As he prepared to leave, Dumbledore posed one more question. Tell me, Harry, what do you see when you look in that mirror? Beyond your parents, that is. It was a test, Harry realized, a subtle probe to determine how much he knew about his heritage. Just my family, sir, he answered carefully. The people who would have loved me if they'd lived. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with what might have been satisfaction, or disappointment. A most natural desire, the headmaster said softly. Now, why don't you put that admirable cloak back on and get off to bed? As Harry walked back to Gryffindor Tower, he considered the encounter. Dumbledore had been watching him all along, perhaps even orchestrating these discoveries. The mirror, the cloak, the carefully timed appearances, all seemed designed to shape Harry's perceptions and actions. But what was the headmaster's ultimate goal? Was he testing Harry's character, his resilience, his knowledge of his inheritance? Or was it something deeper, something connected to the Philosopher's Stone and whatever had happened the night Harry's parents died? One thing seemed certain, the game between them was growing more complex, with each move revealing new dimensions to their silent contest. As winter deepened and the new term began, Harry redoubled his careful study of magical inheritance and his meditation practices. When the moment for confrontation finally came, as it inevitably would, he intended to be prepared. For now, though, he would continue his strategy of careful observation and controlled visibility. Dumbledore might believe he was guiding an ignorant pawn across the chessboard, but Harry was developing his own understanding of the game, and he had allies the headmaster knew nothing about. The real match was only beginning. Chapter 3, Trials and Tribulations. January descended upon Hogwarts with bitter winds and ice-crusted windows. Students returned from their holiday breaks to find the castle corridors frigid despite roaring fires in every grate. But the coldest reception awaited Harry Potter in the dungeons, where Professor Snape seemed to have developed an even deeper animosity over the break. Potter, Snape hissed during their first potions lesson of the new term. Perhaps you could enlighten us about the properties of moonstone in healing drafts? Or has your newfound Quidditch fame addled what little intellect you possessed? Harry met the professor's gaze steadily. Moonstone stabilizes transformative ingredients, sir. In healing potions, it prevents negative side effects while amplifying restorative properties. Something flickered across Snape's sallow face, surprise, perhaps, or reluctant acknowledgement, before his customary sneer returned. A textbook answer. 1 point to Gryffindor for basic literacy. Beside Harry, Ron snorted quietly. 1 whole point. He's getting positively generous. Silence, Weasley, Snape snapped, though his eyes remained fixed on Harry. And 5 points from Gryffindor for disrupting my class. As they left the dungeons an hour later, Hermione caught up with Harry and Ron, her arms laden with books. She'd returned from the holidays with renewed determination to discover Nicholas Flamel's identity, unaware that Harry already knew about the Philosopher's Stone. "I've been through every section of the library," she whispered as they climbed the stairs to the Great Hall. "Nothing. It's almost as if someone deliberately removed all references to him. Or placed them in the restricted section," Harry suggested, recalling his nighttime adventure before Christmas. Hermione nodded thoughtfully. "We need a teacher's permission to access those books, though." "Fat chance of that," Ron grumbled. "What would we say?" "Please, Professor, we're trying to find out about the Philosopher's Stone because we think someone's trying to steal it." "The what?" Hermione stopped abruptly, nearly dropping her books. Harry and Ron exchanged panicked glances. In their excitement about Hermione's return, they'd forgotten she hadn't been present when Harry made the connection between Flamel and the stone. "How do you know about the Philosopher's Stone?" Hermione demanded, eyes narrowed with suspicion. "I found it over the holidays," Harry admitted. "In a book called Notable Magical Achievements of the Last Millennium. It mentioned Flamel created the Philosopher's Stone, an object that transforms metal to gold and produces the elixir of life." The lie came smoothly, though Harry disliked deceiving Hermione. But explaining his true knowledge would open questions about his inheritance that he wasn't prepared to answer. Hermione studied him for a moment longer before nodding. "That makes sense. But why didn't you tell me immediately?" "Wanted to surprise you," Ron interjected with a grin. "The look on your face was worth it." Hermione huffed but seemed to accept the explanation. "Well, this confirms our theory. The stone must be what Fluffy is guarding in the third-floor corridor. And what Snape is trying to steal," Ron added. Harry remained silent, unconvinced that Snape was their culprit despite the professor's hostility. Something about Quirrell's nervous demeanor felt calculated rather than genuine, and the pain in Harry's scar occurred more frequently in the defense professor's presence. "We still don't know why it's here instead of Gringotts," Hermione mused as they entered the Great Hall for lunch. "Security, probably," Ron suggested through a mouthful of sandwich moments later. "Dad says Dumbledore's the only wizard you know who ever feared. Maybe Flamel thinks it's safer here. Or maybe there's another reason entirely," Harry said quietly. "Something connected to Hogwarts itself." Hermione gave him a curious look but was distracted by the arrival of the afternoon's post. A large official-looking owl swooped toward their table, depositing a thick envelope before Harry. "That's a Gringotts seal," Ron observed, eyeing the wax impression with its intricate G symbol. Harry tucked the envelope into his robes, pulse quickening. "Probably just account information," he said casually. "I'll read it later." In truth, he'd been expecting this letter since returning from the holidays. Blood Fawn had promised developments during winter break, and the weight of the envelope suggested significant news. Only after ensuring his dormitory was empty that evening did Harry carefully break the seal and unfold the contents. "Mr. Potter, as per our previous discussions, I am pleased to inform you that the Inheritance Court of Wizarding Britain has approved your petition for limited emancipation. Effective immediately, you are recognized as head of House Potter with all financial and property rights thereto, though certain legal guardianship matters remain in effect until your 15th birthday due to compromise negotiations. Our audit of your accounts has been formally registered with the Ministry's Financial Regulation Department. Preliminary findings indicate unauthorized withdrawals totaling 2,147,892 galleons from your various inherited vaults over the past decade. Albus Dumbledore has been officially notified of these findings and given 30 days to respond before criminal proceedings commence. We have successfully recovered 890,563 galleons through asset freezing procedures. The remaining amount appears to have been converted to physical property or transferred to untraceable accounts. Further investigation continues. Of particular note, upon emancipation, the hereditary seats on the Waisengamot associated with your various houses have activated. As you are still a minor, you may designate a proxy to vote on your behalf until you reach majority. Without designation, these seats remain vacant but reserved. We recommend maintaining public discretion regarding these developments for the time being. Certain parties may not react favorably to this shift in your status. Your account manager, Bloodfong P.S. The Flamel connection has been confirmed. Ancient magical contract dated 1342 between House Potter and Nicholas Flamel grants your bloodline certain protective rights regarding his alchemical creations. The current situation at your school technically violates this agreement, as you should have been formally consulted about security arrangements. Harry read the letter 3 times, his heart racing faster with each review. The emancipation was proceeding. He now controlled his finances and properties, though Dumbledore apparently retained some form of guardianship until Harry turned 15. More significantly, the audit had been officially registered, and Dumbledore had been notified of the investigation. The headmaster now knew that Harry was aware of the theft. The timing couldn't have been worse. With the Philosopher's Stone hidden at Hogwarts and someone, Quirrell or Snape, attempting to steal it, confronting Dumbledore about his financial crimes would complicate an already dangerous situation. Yet Harry couldn't suppress a surge of satisfaction. After a decade of manipulation and theft, Dumbledore would finally face consequences. The recovery of nearly 900,000 galleons was itself a significant victory. Most intriguing was the confirmation of his connection to Flamel. A magical contract from the 14th century granted House Potter protective rights over Flamel's creations, including, presumably, the Philosopher's Stone. This explained the by oath designation in his inheritance test, and suggested Harry had legitimate authority regarding the stone's protection. After carefully storing the letter in his trunk beneath several layers of clothing, Harry descended to the common room, where he found Hermione deep in conversation with Neville Longbottom about a herbology assignment. Harry. Neville greeted him with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Hermione's been helping me understand flesh-eating shrub propagation. Did you know they're distantly related to the same magical plant family as Devil's Snare? Harry smiled at his friend's evident passion for the subject. Since their conversation about their family's connection, Neville had grown notably more confident, especially in herbology, where he frequently outshone even Hermione. That's brilliant, Neville. Actually, I wanted to ask you something, about old wizarding families. Neville straightened, clearly pleased to be consulted on a topic where his traditional upbringing might provide insight. What do you want to know? How does the Waisengamot work? I've read it has hereditary seats for ancient and noble houses, but I'm not clear on how those operate. Hermione looked up with interest as Neville considered the question. Well, the Waisengamot has 50 seats total, Neville explained. 25 are ministry appointments, and 25 are hereditary seats held by the oldest magical families. My grandmother holds the Longbottom seat until I come of age. The Potter family has one too, but... He trailed off awkwardly. But since my parents died, who controls it? Harry prompted. That's just it, no one, as far as I know. Normally your magical guardian would serve as proxy until you're 17, but Gran says the Potter seat has been vacant since your parents' deaths. She always thought it was strange, since Dumbledore was rumored to be your guardian. Harry processed this information carefully. So Dumbledore had chosen not to exercise the Potter vote, perhaps to avoid drawing attention to his connection to Harry's affairs. Why the sudden interest in wizarding politics? Hermione asked, her sharp eyes studying Harry's face. Just trying to understand my place in this world, Harry replied honestly. There's so much about my family's history I don't know. Hermione's expression softened with sympathy. We could research the Potter family in the library if you'd like. Historical records, genealogy books, there must be information available. Thanks, Hermione. That would be brilliant. The conversation shifted to their upcoming transfiguration test, but Harry's mind remained on the implications of Bloodfang's letter. Dumbledore had 30 days to respond to the audit before criminal charges were filed. How would the headmaster react to this threat to his reputation and freedom? And more immediately, how would it affect his behavior toward Harry? He didn't have to wait long for an answer. The following morning, Professor McGonagall approached the Gryffindor table during breakfast. "Mr. Potter," she said briskly, "the headmaster would like to see you in his office immediately after breakfast." Harry maintained a neutral expression despite his racing pulse. "Yes, Professor. Where is his office?" "I will escort you myself," McGonagall replied. "Finish your meal and meet me in the entrance hall in 15 minutes. As she strode away, Ron leaned closer. "What do you think that's about?" "No idea," Harry lied, forcing himself to take another bite of toast despite his suddenly dry mouth. "You're not in trouble, are you?" Hermione whispered. "We haven't broken any rules recently, well, except for being in the library after hours last week, but no one saw us." "I'm sure it's nothing," Harry assured them, though he knew exactly what awaited him. The question was, how would he handle this first direct confrontation with Dumbledore? 15 minutes later, McGonagall led Harry through corridors he'd never explored, eventually stopping before an imposing stone gargoyle. "Acid pops," she pronounced clearly, and the gargoyle sprang aside, revealing a spiral staircase that moved continuously upward like an escalator. "The headmaster is expecting you," McGonagall said, gesturing for Harry to step onto the stairs. "I trust you can find your way back to your dormitory afterward." Harry nodded, noting that McGonagall wouldn't be present for the meeting, a small advantage, as it meant one less adult to navigate. The moving staircase deposited him before a gleaming oak door with a brass knocker. Before Harry could reach for it, a serene voice called, "Enter, Harry." The circular office beyond was unlike any room Harry had seen at Hogwarts. Delicate silver instruments whirred and emitted puffs of colored smoke on spindle-legged tables. The walls were covered with portraits of previous headmasters and headmistresses, many of whom were dozing in their frames. Behind an enormous claw-footed desk sat Albus Dumbledore, his silver beard gleaming in the morning light streaming through the high windows. "Good morning, Harry," Dumbledore greeted him, blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. "Please, take a seat. Would you care for a lemon drop?" "No thank you, sir," Harry replied, settling into the chair opposite the desk. He deliberately avoided direct eye contact, focusing instead on Dumbledore's beard or the bridge of his nose, a technique Blood Fong had suggested to counter potential legitimacy without appearing obviously evasive. "I imagine you're wondering why I've asked to see you," Dumbledore began, steepling his fingers. "How are you finding your first year at Hogwarts?" The casual question seemed designed to put Harry at ease, or to gauge how much he knew about the real purpose of the meeting. "It's been educational, sir," Harry answered carefully. "I'm learning a lot about the wizarding world." "Indeed? And what has been your most interesting discovery thus far?" Harry considered his response. Best to demonstrate awareness without revealing the full extent of his knowledge. "That my family had a longer history in the magical world than I realized," he said. "Professor Binns mentioned the Potters in our history of magic class. Apparently my ancestors created several important healing potions." Dumbledore nodded approvingly. "Your family does indeed have a distinguished magical lineage. Your father came from a long line of notable wizards, while your mother, though Muggle-born, was remarkably gifted in her own right." "So I've heard," Harry replied. "Professor Snape seems to have known my mother." A flicker of surprise crossed Dumbledore's face before his serene expression returned. "Indeed. They were childhood friends before Hogwarts, though they grew apart during their school years." This was new information that Harry filed away for future consideration. Snape had known his mother before Hogwarts. It might explain some of the professor's complex hostility. "Harry," Dumbledore continued, his tone growing more serious, "I've received a rather unusual notice from Gringotts regarding your family vaults. It seems someone has initiated an audit and emancipation petition on your behalf." And there it was, the real purpose of this meeting. Harry kept his expression neutral, his heart thundering in his chest. "That's strange, sir," he replied. "Why would someone do that?" Dumbledore studied him carefully. "Indeed, why would they?" The goblins were remarkably tight-lipped about who authorized these proceedings. "As your magical guardian, I should have been consulted before any such actions were taken." Harry decided to test the waters. "What exactly does a magical guardian do, Professor? No one ever explained that to me." "A magical guardian makes decisions regarding a magical child's welfare, education, and financial matters when their parents are deceased or unable to do so," Dumbledore explained. "I assumed this responsibility after your parents' tragic deaths to ensure your safety and proper introduction to our world." "I see," Harry said neutrally. "And the audit? What does that involve?" Dumbledore's expression remained kind, though Harry detected a slight tightening around his eyes. "It appears to be a comprehensive review of all transactions involving your family vault since your parents' passing. A routine procedure in some respects, though the timing is curious." "Is there something wrong with my accounts?" Harry asked, feigning innocent concern. "Not at all," Dumbledore assured him smoothly. "As your guardian, I've managed your inheritance carefully, making occasional necessary withdrawals for your care and protection. All perfectly standard and documented." The blatant lie hung in the air between them. 2,000,000 galleons for care and protection, while Harry slept in a cupboard, wore Dudley's cast-offs, and the Dursleys complained constantly about his financial burden. "That's reassuring, Professor," Harry said, struggling to keep sarcasm from his tone. "I'm sure everything will be sorted out quickly, then." Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. "Harry, I must ask, have you been in contact with anyone outside Hogwarts regarding your family matters? Perhaps someone approached you during your visit to Diagon Alley?" "No, sir," Harry replied truthfully. His arrangement with Blood Fong had begun in Gringotts itself, not afterward. "Why do you ask?" "Merely concerned for your welfare," Dumbledore said. "There are those in our world who might seek to manipulate the boy who lived for their own purposes. I've worked to protect you from such influences." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Harry struggled to maintain his facade of ignorant trust. "Thank you for your concern, sir. If someone does approach me about anything unusual, I'll be sure to tell you." Dumbledore nodded, though his piercing gaze suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by Harry's performance. "Very good. Now, is there anything you'd like to discuss with me? Any questions about your parents, perhaps, or concerns about your studies?" Harry hesitated, then decided to probe for information about a different matter. "Actually, sir, I was wondering about Professor Quirrell. He seems afraid of his own subject." "Professor Quirrell encountered certain dark creatures during his sabbatical that left him somewhat changed," Dumbledore replied smoothly. "Teaching defense against the dark arts requires first-hand knowledge of its dangers, knowledge Quirrell unfortunately acquired rather traumatically." "I see," Harry nodded. "One more thing, sir, the mirror you showed me at Christmas. You said it shows our deepest desires. What do you see when you look in it?" The question seemed to catch Dumbledore off guard. For a moment, genuine emotion flickered across the old wizard's face, something like grief or regret, before his pleasant mask returned. I see myself holding a pair of thick, woolen socks," he replied with a gentle smile. "One can never have enough socks. Another Christmas has come and gone and I didn't get a single pair. People will insist on giving me books." It was clearly a deflection, but Harry merely nodded, recognizing that everyone had secrets they preferred to keep private, himself included. "Thank you for your time, Professor," Harry said, rising from his chair. "Of course, my boy. My door is always open to you." Dumbledore's tone was grandfatherly, but his eyes remained calculating. "Oh, and Harry. The holidays can be a difficult time for those separated from loved ones. I trust your Christmas was nonetheless pleasant." The seemingly innocuous question carried a subtle weight. Was Dumbledore fishing to discover whether Harry had received the mysterious time-turner? "It was the best Christmas I've ever had, sir," Harry answered honestly. "Ron and I had the dormitory to ourselves, and Mrs. Weasley sent me a jumper. I'd never received proper Christmas presents before." Something like genuine regret crossed Dumbledore's features. "I am truly sorry your childhood has not been happier, Harry. Sometimes difficult choices must be made for greater protections." "Protection from what, exactly?" Harry asked before he could stop himself. "There are those who served Voldemort who remain at large," Dumbledore replied gravely. "Your mother's blood protection through her sister provides a shield that keeps you safe from them as long as you call Privet Drive home." This was new information, and potentially significant. Blood protection through his aunt might explain why Dumbledore had ignored his parents while regarding his placement. But it didn't justify the theft or the decade of neglect. "I understand, sir," Harry said, though in truth, he had more questions than ever. "May I go now? I have Transfiguration in 20 minutes. "Of course. Give my regards to Professor McGonagall." Dumbledore smiled benignly. "And Harry? Do remember that appearances can be deceiving. Not all who seem to act in your interest truly have your welfare at heart." The irony of this warning from the man who had stolen his inheritance was almost laughable, but Harry merely nodded and departed. As the spiral staircase carried him downward, he analyzed the encounter. Dumbledore clearly suspected Harry knew more than he was admitting but seemed uncertain of the extent of his knowledge. The headmaster had lied smoothly about the withdrawals while hinting at greater purposes and protections, laying groundwork to justify his actions when fully exposed. Most importantly, Dumbledore had revealed the blood protection connection to Aunt Petunia, a detail that might prove crucial in understanding the broader picture. Harry made a mental note to research blood-based protective magic at his earliest opportunity. "He's watching you," Ron muttered during dinner that evening. "Dumbledore hasn't taken his eyes off you since we sat down." Harry nodded without turning toward the staff table. "McGonagall too. And Snape, but that's nothing new." Hermione glanced discreetly over her shoulder. "What exactly happened in your meeting this morning? You've been evasive all day." "Nothing important," Harry shrugged. "Just checking how I'm settling in, asking if I had questions about my parents." "Headmaster stuff. That's odd timing, isn't it?" Hermione observed. "Half a year into term." Harry had to admire her perceptiveness. "Maybe. Listen, I need your help with something, researching blood-based protection spells. Apparently my mother did something the night she died that protected me from Voldemort, and it's connected to my aunt somehow." Hermione's eyes widened with interest, academic curiosity temporarily overriding her suspicions. "That sounds like ancient magic, sacrifice-based protection perhaps. I've read references to it, but detailed information would be in the restricted section." "We need a teacher's permission slip," Ron groaned. "Who'd give us that?" "Hagrid might help," Harry suggested. "Not directly, but he tends to let things slip when he's relaxed. We could visit him tomorrow after classes." His friends agreed, unaware that Harry had another, more immediate research method planned. The time turner he'd received at Christmas remained carefully hidden in his trunk, and used until he could properly investigate its potential dangers. Tonight seemed the perfect opportunity to test it while investigating blood magic in the restricted section under his invisibility cloak. After ensuring his dorm mates were asleep, Harry slipped out of bed and collected both magical items from his trunk. The invisibility cloak settled around his shoulders like liquid silver, while the time-turner's delicate chain felt cool against his neck beneath his pajamas. In the empty common room, Harry carefully examined the hourglass pendant. According to the note, he could travel back up to 5 hours, enough to spend the night researching and still get proper sleep before classes. Taking a deep breath, he turned the hourglass 3 times, figuring 3 hours would be sufficient. The sensation was disorienting, the room blurred around him as shadowy figures moved in reverse at dizzying speed. When everything settled, the common room looked identical, but the clock on the wall showed 11:30 p.m. instead of 2:30 a.m. Harry released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It had worked. He now had 3 extra hours to research in the restricted section while his past self slept upstairs. Moving silently under the cloak, Harry navigated through darkened corridors to the library. Unlike his Christmas adventure, this time he came prepared with a self-inking quill, parchment, and a tiny magical light that wouldn't trigger the same alarm as a full lamp. The restricted section's forbidding shelves loomed before him as he ducked under the rope barrier. Instead of randomly selecting books, Harry methodically searched for titles related to protective magic, blood wards, and sacrificial enchantments. After nearly an hour, he found a promising tome, Sanguis Tutela, Blood Protections Through the Ages. Unlike the screaming book from his previous visit, this volume merely emitted a faint hum when opened, like distant chanting. Harry carefully turned its pages, transcribing relevant passages onto his parchment. The information was fascinating. Blood magic represented one of the oldest and most powerful forms of protection, capable of establishing wards that no conventional spell could penetrate. Most required complex rituals, but the book described one exception, the sacrificial shield, created when a witch or wizard knowingly and willingly gives their life to protect another, can create an impenetrable barrier against the specific magical threat that prompted the sacrifice. This protection becomes part of the saved individual's very being and can be anchored through blood relatives for sustained effect. While temporary in most circumstances, proper anchoring through familial blood can maintain the shield indefinitely so long as the saved individual considers the blood relative's dwelling home. Harry's quill stilled as he processed the implications. His mother's sacrifice had created this shield, and Dumbledore had anchored it through Aunt Petunia, the only blood relative Harry had left. As long as Harry called Privet Drive home, he apparently carried protection against Voldemort. It explained why Dumbledore had placed him with the Dursleys despite his parents' will. It did not, however, explain or justify the 2 million galleons stolen from his vaults, nor the decade of neglect and abuse. Further pages revealed additional constraints of blood magic, its power diminished with age unless regularly renewed through magical means. More significantly, such protection typically ended when the threat it was designed against was truly vanquished or when the protected individual reached magical maturity at 17. By the time Harry finished his research and carefully returned the book to its shelf, his mind was whirling with implications. Dumbledore's decision to place him with the Dursleys had a legitimate magical basis, but it appeared the protection would eventually fade regardless. Was this why the headmaster had been stealing such vast sums? Preparing for some future where Harry would need different protections? Or was the blood magic simply a convenient excuse for controlling Harry's upbringing and access to the wizarding world? As Harry made his way back to Gryffindor Tower, he nearly collided with Mrs. Norris at a corridor junction. The dust-colored cat froze, her lamp-like eyes staring directly at the spot where Harry stood despite his invisibility cloak. Before he could retreat, footsteps approached, Filch, no doubt following his feline companion. Harry pressed himself against the wall, scarcely breathing as the caretaker shuffled past, muttering about students out of bed. But it wasn't Filch who appeared around the corner. It was Professor Quirrell, moving with a purposeful stride entirely unlike his usual nervous shuffle. His expression was focused, almost predatory, and he wasn't stuttering as he whispered to himself in a voice too low for Harry to catch. Most striking was his route. Quirrell was heading directly toward the forbidden third-floor corridor. Without conscious decision, Harry found himself following the defense professor, maintaining a careful distance. This might be his chance to confirm whether Quirrell or Snape was the true threat to the Philosopher's Stone. Quirrell paused at the entrance to the forbidden corridor, drawing his wand and muttering a complex unlocking charm that made the door click open. As he slipped inside, Harry hurried forward to catch the door before it closed completely. The corridor beyond was dark and silent. At the far end loomed another door, presumably the entrance to Fluffy's chamber. Quirrell stood before it, wand raised, when suddenly a silky voice spoke from the shadows. "Good evening, Quirrell." Professor Snape emerged from an alcove, his black robes making him nearly invisible in the darkness. "Fancy meeting you here." "SS Severus," Quirrell stammered, his nervous demeanor instantly returning. I was just checking the PP protections. Indeed? Snape's voice dripped with skepticism. How dedicated you've become to security measures recently. One might almost think you were searching for weaknesses. Nonsense, Quirrell protested. Dumbledore asked all staff to maintain vigilance. Then you won't mind if I accompany you? Snape suggested silkily. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, after all. Quirrell's face twitched with barely suppressed anger before his fearful mask reasserted itself. And not at all, but perhaps another night. I've just recalled an urgent matter with the third-year curriculum. How convenient, Snape drawled. Very well, Quirrell. Another time. As the defense professor hurried away, Snape remained motionless, his dark eyes following Quirrell's retreating form. After several minutes of silent contemplation, the potions master cast a complex series of detection spells at the door leading to Fluffy, nodded in apparent satisfaction, and departed in the opposite direction. Harry waited until both professors were gone before retreating to Gryffindor Tower, his mind racing with this new evidence. Snape wasn't trying to steal the stone, he was protecting it from Quirrell. But why? Was Snape working with Dumbledore, or did he have his own reasons for safeguarding Flamel's creation? By the time Harry slipped back through the portrait hole, it was nearly time for his past self to use the time-turner. He retreated to an empty classroom near the tower and waited until 2:30 a.m. had safely passed before returning to his dormitory. As he finally settled into bed, exhaustion washing over him, Harry revised his mental assessment of the castle's power dynamics. Dumbledore, Snape, and Quirrell each had distinct agendas regarding the Philosopher's Stone, while Harry's own legitimate claim to protect it through his Flamel inheritance added yet another dimension to the complex situation. And none of them, except perhaps Dumbledore, knew about the financial investigation that would soon expose the headmaster's decade of theft. Sleep claimed Harry as he contemplated how these separate threads might intertwine in the coming weeks. Whatever happened, the approaching confrontation would reshape his understanding of not just his past, but his future in the wizarding world. Dragons. Ron hissed as they hurried across the grounds toward Hagrid's hut the following afternoon. I'm telling you, that's what he's got in there. Don't be ridiculous, Hermione replied, though she sounded uncertain. Dragon breeding was outlawed by the Warlocks' Convention of 1709. Everyone knows that. Harry remained silent, recalling their last visit to Hagrid a week earlier. The gamekeeper's cabin had been swelteringly hot despite mild weather, all curtains drawn, and Hagrid suspiciously evasive about a large object he'd hastily covered when they arrived. When they knocked on Hagrid's door this time, his gruff voice called, "Who is it?" before he would admit them. Inside, the heat was stifling. Despite the warm day, a blazing fire roared in the grate, and Hagrid offered them tea and stoat sandwiches, which they politely declined. Hagrid, Harry began carefully, we wanted to ask you about the Philosopher's Stone's protections. The gamekeeper nearly dropped his teapot. How do ya know about? Never mind, I don't want to know. Ya shouldn't be pokin' around in this, Harry. It's dangerous business. We think Quirrell is trying to steal it, Hermione said earnestly. Quirrell? Hagrid looked surprised. Why would he? We saw him heading to the third-floor corridor at midnight, Harry improvised, not mentioning his invisible observation of the professor's confrontation. And he's been asking other teachers about their protections. Hagrid's bushy eyebrows drew together. Even if that were true, which I'm not saying it is, he'd never get past Fluffy. Only me and Dumbledore know how to get past him. So there are other enchantments besides Fluffy? Ron asked eagerly. Protections from the different teachers? Course there are, Hagrid said proudly. Everyone's specialty. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall, Professor Quirrell, Professor Snape, and Dumbledore himself did something, too. Impenetrable, it is. Harry and Hermione exchanged alarmed glances. If Quirrell was indeed trying to steal the stone, he already knew how to get past his own protection. That's 5 of the 6 protections accounted for, Harry noted. What about the sixth? Can't tell ya that, Hagrid said firmly. Top secret, that is. Harry changed tactics, recalling his original research purpose. Hagrid, I wanted to ask you something else, about my mother. Dumbledore mentioned she used blood magic to protect me the night Voldemort attacked. Hagrid flinched at the name but looked sympathetic. Aye, that she did. Lily was brilliant with charms, could make connections other wizards never thought of. That night, well, her love for Ya was stronger than you-know-who's hate. Created a protection that burns him when he tries to touch Ya. But how does it work? Harry pressed. Why did I have to live with the Dursleys specifically? Hagrid shifted uncomfortably. That's Dumbledore's area, that is. Something about your aunt's blood carrying your mum's protection. While Ya live with her, you know who can't touch Ya there. So the protection is tied to Privet Drive specifically? Hermione asked, her analytical mind clearly working through implications. What about when Harry's at Hogwarts? Different kind of protection here, Hagrid replied. Ancient magic in the castle itself, plus Dumbledore's presence. No safer place, except perhaps Gringotts, and even that's not true anymore, is it? As they continued discussing protections, Harry noticed Hagrid constantly glancing at the fire. Following his gaze, Harry spotted a massive black egg nestled in the heart of the flames. Hagrid, he said slowly, what exactly is that? Ah, Hagrid's expression turned sheepish. That's, where did you get it? Ron asked, moving closer to the fire with awe in his eyes. Must have cost you a fortune. Won it, Hagrid said proudly. Last night in the village, having a few drinks, got into a game o' cards with a stranger. Seemed quite glad to be rid of it, to be honest. But what are you going to do when it hatches? Hermione asked, horrified. Hagrid, you live in a wooden house. While Ron and Hermione tried to reason with the gamekeeper about the impracticality and illegality of raising a dragon, Harry's mind focused on a different aspect of Hagrid's story. A stranger just happened to have a dragon egg, something extremely rare and illegal, and conveniently lost it to Hagrid, who worked at the school currently housing the Philosopher's Stone. Hagrid, Harry interrupted, this stranger, did you happen to tell him about Fluffy? Hagrid looked startled by the question. Well, he asked what sort o' creatures I look after. So I told him, after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy, might have mentioned Fluffy's weakness too. Which is? Harry prompted, dread building in his stomach. I shouldn't have said that, Hagrid muttered. Forget I mentioned it. But Harry persisted, and eventually Hagrid admitted that Fluffy would fall asleep when played music, information he had indeed shared with the mysterious stranger. As they left Hagrid's hut, Harry shared his suspicions. That was no random stranger. Someone's been trying to find out how to get past Fluffy, and Hagrid just told them. We've got to tell Dumbledore, Hermione insisted. If someone knows how to get past Fluffy, we don't have proof of anything yet, Harry countered, reluctant to approach the headmaster given their complicated situation. Let's keep watch on the third-floor corridor ourselves. If we see Quirrell heading there again, then we'll go to a teacher. Ron and Hermione agreed, unaware of Harry's private reasons for avoiding Dumbledore. The Gringotts investigation remained his secret leverage, one he wasn't prepared to compromise until absolutely necessary. Events accelerated rapidly over the following weeks. Hagrid's dragon, a Norwegian ridgeback he named Norbert, hatched and quickly grew from the size of a small dog to that of a large wolf, necessitating a complicated plan to smuggle it to Ron's brother Charlie in Romania. Though the operation succeeded, Neville overheard their planning and attempted to warn them about Malfoy's knowledge of their scheme, resulting in all three being caught out after curfew. McGonagall's fury at their rule-breaking resulted in 50 house points each being deducted from Gryffindor, along with detention in the Forbidden Forest with Hagrid. The sudden loss of 150 points plunged Gryffindor from first to last place in the House Cup standings and made Harry, Hermione, and Neville temporary pariahs among their housemates. It's not fair to include Neville, Harry insisted to Ron as they ate breakfast amid glares from fellow Gryffindors. He was only trying to help us. Ron shrugged, his mouth full of bacon. Everyone's just angry about the points. They'll get over it eventually. I'm going to talk to him, Harry decided, moving down the table to where Neville sat alone, pushing food around his plate without eating. Mind if I join you? Harry asked quietly. Neville looked up, surprise replacing his miserable expression. You're not angry with me. Why would I be? You were trying to warn us. Harry sat beside him. I'm sorry you got caught up in our mess. Everyone else hates me, Neville mumbled. I've lost more points in one night than anyone in Gryffindor history. Not true, Harry corrected. I lost the same amount. And honestly, points don't matter compared to friendship and doing what's right. Neville studied him for a moment before a small smile curved his lips. My gran always says something similar, that courage isn't about winning prizes, it's about standing up for what's important. Your gran sounds wise, Harry grinned. And tonight's detention can't be that bad with Hagrid supervising. He likes us. Their detention, however, proved more harrowing than anticipated. Assigned to help Hagrid investigate something killing unicorns in the Forbidden Forest, they split into groups to search for an injured unicorn. Harry, paired with Malfoy and Fawkes, followed a trail of silvery blood deeper into the forest until they discovered the unicorn's corpse in a clearing. A hooded figure was bent over the magnificent beast, drinking its blood. When it raised its head and looked directly at Harry, excruciating pain seared through his scar, nearly blinding him. As the figure glided toward him, Harry found himself frozen in terror, unable to call for help or flee. The sound of hooves broke the spell as a centaur charged into the clearing, forcing the hooded figure to retreat. The centaur, who introduced himself as Firenze, allowed Harry to ride on his back to safety, explaining during their journey that unicorn blood could sustain a cursed half-life for someone clinging to existence. But who would be that desperate? Harry had asked. Wouldn't death be better than being cursed forever? It would, Firenze agreed, unless all you need is to stay alive long enough to drink something else, something that will bring you back to full strength and power. Mr. Potter, do you know what is hidden in the school at this very moment? The Philosopher's Stone, Harry whispered. But that would mean, the figure was Voldemort. Firenze had merely looked at him solemnly before delivering him to Hagrid. Now, 3 days later, Harry sat in the library with Ron and Hermione, recounting the experience yet again as they tried to piece together the full picture. So Quirrell is helping Voldemort get the stone, Ron summarized, wincing at the name. And Snape is trying to stop him, not the other way around. That's what it looks like, Harry agreed. Quirrell must be possessed or under Voldemort's control somehow. It would explain the pain in my scar when he's nearby. Hermione chewed her lip anxiously. We need to tell Dumbledore immediately. If you know who is trying to come back, Dumbledore already suspects something, Harry interjected. Why else would he bring the stone to Hogwarts in the first place? He must have known it was in danger at Gringotts. But if he knows, why hasn't he stopped Quirrell? Ron asked. Harry had been pondering the same question. Maybe he's waiting for Quirrell to make his move so he can catch Voldemort too. Or maybe he doesn't have enough proof yet. Or maybe, Hermione said hesitantly, he's using the stone as bait. With Harry here. She didn't finish the thought, but she didn't need to. Harry had already considered the possibility that Dumbledore had deliberately created a situation where Voldemort would be drawn to Hogwarts, and to Harry specifically. It aligned with the headmaster's pattern of manipulation. Place the stone in Hogwarts where Voldemort would inevitably pursue it, knowing Harry's connection to the Dark Lord would draw them together. Was this another of Dumbledore's tests? And if so, what was its purpose? Whatever the reason, Harry said finally, we need to be ready in case Quirrell makes his move while Dumbledore isn't around to stop him. Hermione nodded reluctantly. But how will we know when that happens? Her question was answered the very next day when they spotted Professor McGonagall directing a group of visitors toward the entrance hall. Among them was a wizard wearing official-looking robes with the Ministry of Magic insignia. Witness testimonies in the Black case, they overheard McGonagall explaining to Professor Sprout. Dumbledore will be at the Ministry all day, perhaps longer if Fudge insists on a full Wisengamot hearing. Harry froze. Black case. As in Sirius Black, my parents' friend who supposedly betrayed them? Must be, Ron agreed. Dad mentioned something about ongoing appeals or new evidence. Procedural stuff, he said. But Harry was more concerned with the immediate implication. Dumbledore's away from the castle. This is exactly the opportunity Quirrell's been waiting for. That evening, as they sat in the common room watching the entrance while pretending to study for their upcoming exams, Hermione suddenly gasped. I just remembered, the detention in the forest was 3 nights ago. Harry looked at her blankly. Yes, and? The unicorn blood. Firenze said it would keep you-know-who alive long enough to get the stone, but it wouldn't work forever. If he's growing desperate. Tonight, Harry realized. He'll try tonight. They decided to take turns watching the third-floor corridor under Harry's invisibility cloak. But when Harry and Hermione returned from their first shift, they found the common room in chaos. Neville was lying rigid on the floor, apparently the victim of a full-body bind curse. Ron did it, Neville managed once Hermione performed the counter-curse. Said he had to stop me warning you. He took your cloak, Harry, said something about checking Fluffy himself. Harry's blood ran cold. When? Just 10 minutes ago, Neville replied, rubbing his arms as feeling returned. He said you were too cautious, that someone needed to make sure the stone was still safe. Harry and Hermione exchanged horrified glances. Ron had gone alone to face whatever awaited beyond Fluffy, possibly Quirrell and Voldemort himself. We have to go after him, Harry said grimly. Neville, find Professor McGonagall. Tell her Quirrell is after the Philosopher's Stone and Ron's gone to stop him. I'm coming with you, Neville insisted, standing shakily. No, Harry said firmly. We need someone to get help. Please, Neville, our families were allies. Trust me on this. The reminder of their family's connection seemed to strengthen Neville's resolve. He nodded solemnly. Be careful, both of you. Harry and Hermione raced to the third-floor corridor, finding the door already ajar. Inside, an enormous harp lay on the floor beside Fluffy's massive paws, the three-headed dog fully awake and growling menacingly. The music stopped, Hermione whispered. We need. Before she could finish, Harry pulled out the wooden flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas and began to play. Despite having no real tune, the effect on Fluffy was immediate, its eyelids drooped, its growls ceased, and it sank slowly to the ground, fast asleep. Keep playing, Hermione instructed as she pulled open the trapdoor in the floor. I'll go first and call if it's safe. Harry nodded, maintaining his tuneless melody as Hermione lowered herself through the opening and dropped out of sight. After a moment, her voice floated up, it's a soft landing, some kind of plant. Come on. Taking a deep breath, Harry jumped through the trapdoor while still playing the flute, cutting off mid-note as he plunged into darkness. He landed on something soft and spongy, but before he could orient himself, he felt tendrils wrapping around his limbs. Devil's snare. Hermione cried from somewhere to his left. Don't struggle, it will only kill you faster. Kill us faster. Harry repeated incredulously, fighting against the plant's tightening grip. Real helpful, Hermione. I'm trying to remember how to kill it, she gasped. Devil's snare, it likes dark and damp. Fire. Harry shouted, recalling Neville's herbology enthusiasm. It hates fire. Hermione drew her wand and cast a spell that sent jets of bluebell flames toward the plant. Within seconds, the devil's snare loosened its grip, allowing them to pull free and drop through to a stone passage below. Good thing Neville's talked about devil's snare in herbology so often, Harry commented as they hurried down the passage. Where's Ron? Must be ahead of us, Hermione replied. Look, there's light up ahead. They emerged into a brilliantly lit chamber with a ceiling soaring high above them. The room was filled with small, jewel-bright birds fluttering around, except they weren't birds at all, but winged keys. On the opposite side stood a heavy wooden door. Flitwick's challenge, Harry guessed, spotting broomsticks leaning against the wall. We have to catch the right key to unlock that door. Ron was there, red-faced and frustrated, swatting ineffectually at the keys from atop a broomstick. About time, he called when he spotted them. I can't find the right one, there are thousands. Harry mounted another broomstick, his seeker's eyes scanning the swarm of keys. Look for an old-fashioned one, probably silver, like the handle. Within minutes, he had spotted and captured a large silver key with bent wings, clearly damaged from being caught and used before. It fit the lock perfectly, allowing them to proceed to the next chamber. It's a chessboard, Ron breathed as they entered a vast room with enormous stone chess pieces. McGonagall's challenge, we have to play our way across. Ron took command, directing Harry and Hermione to take positions as a bishop and a castle while he mounted a stone knight. What followed was the most brutal chess game Harry had ever witnessed, with pieces smashing their opponents to rubble when taking them. I've got to be taken, Ron announced when they were nearly across, his face pale but determined. No. Harry and Hermione shouted together. That's chess. Ron snapped. You've got to make sacrifices. I take one step forward, the queen takes me, and Harry's free to checkmate the king. It's the only way. Before they could argue further, Ron moved his knight forward. The White Queen pounced, striking him hard across the head with her stone arm. Ron crashed to the floor, unconscious as the Queen dragged him to the side of the board. Shaking with emotion, Harry moved 3 spaces to the left, checkmating the White King. As the crown fell from the king's head, the remaining pieces parted, clearing their path to the next door. He'll be all right, Hermione assured Harry, though she looked close to tears. We have to keep going. The next chamber contained a mountain troll, already unconscious with a bloody lump on its head. Quirrell's challenge, Harry noted grimly as they hurried past. At least we don't have to fight this one. They entered a small chamber where purple flames sprang up behind them and black flames blocked the doorway ahead. A table in the center held 7 differently shaped bottles and a roll of parchment. Snape's challenge, Hermione said, examining the logic puzzle described on the parchment. After studying the bottles and clue carefully, she pointed to the smallest bottle. This one will get you through the black flames. Harry peered at the tiny bottle. There's barely enough for one swallow. I know, Hermione said quietly. Harry, it has to be you who goes on. I'll take the rounded bottle at the end, it will let me go back through the purple flames to help Ron and find Dumbledore. Harry hugged her tightly. You're brilliant, Hermione. Truly. Just be careful, she whispered. You're a great wizard, Harry, but Quirrell, and you know who, I'll be okay, Harry promised, though he had no idea if that was true. Go back. Get help. After Hermione departed through the purple flames, Harry took a deep breath, drained the small bottle in one swallow, and walked through the black fire into the final chamber. Someone was already there, but it wasn't Quirrell. It was Snape. The potions master stood before the mirror of Eriste, his back to Harry, wand drawn as he muttered complex incantations. He spun around at the sound of Harry's entrance, eyes widening in apparent shock. Potter. What in Merlin's name are you doing here? Harry raised his own wand, confused but wary. I could ask you the same thing, Professor. Where's Quirrell? Snape's expression darkened. Incapacitated in the staff room after attempting to hex me from behind. I suspected he would make his move tonight with Dumbledore gone. Harry hesitated, uncertain whether to believe the professor who had shown him such hostility all year. So you're not trying to steal the stone for Voldemort? Snape flinched at the name but looked affronted. Don't be absurd, Potter. I've been protecting the stone from Quirrell all year, not that you and your friends believed it, constantly suspecting me despite evidence to the contrary. Then why are you here now? Harry challenged, not lowering his wand. Because Quirrell disabled the alarm on the third-floor door, Snape replied impatiently. When I discovered him unconscious, apparently the victim of his own rebounded curse, I realized someone else must have taken advantage of the situation. I came to secure the stone before they succeeded. It made sense, aligning with Harry's revised suspicions about Snape and Quirrell's roles. But something still felt wrong. The mirror, Harry said, glancing at the ornate object behind Snape. Dumbledore hid the stone inside it somehow, didn't he? Snape looked reluctantly impressed. Yes. His final protection, ingenious, if frustrating. The mirror shows one's deepest desire, but Dumbledore has enchanted it to reveal the stone only to someone who wants to find it but not use it. And you can't get it out? Harry guessed. Snape's lip curled. Obviously not, or we wouldn't be having this conversation. I desire to protect the stone, but part of me wishes to use it for personal matters. The mirror detects such ambivalence. Harry stepped forward cautiously. Let me try. You. Snape scoffed. What makes you think, I just want to keep it safe from Voldemort, Harry interrupted. I have no interest in immortality or gold. Snape studied him for a long moment before stepping aside with obvious reluctance. Very well, Potter. But be warned, if you attempt to take the stone for yourself, I will stop you. Harry approached the mirror, half expecting to see his family again. Instead, he saw only himself, his reflection smiling as it reached into its pocket and withdrew a blood-red stone. Then, incredibly, Mirror Harry winked and placed the stone in Harry's real pocket. As it did so, Harry felt something heavy drop into his actual pocket. He had the Philosopher's Stone. Well? Snape demanded impatiently. What do you see? Before Harry could answer, slow clapping echoed through the chamber. They both whirled to see Professor Quirrell standing in the doorway, his usual stutter and nervous demeanor entirely absent. Touching cooperation between enemies, Quirrell remarked silkily. The despised professor and the famous student, working together to protect Nicholas Flamel's precious stone. Snape immediately placed himself between Harry and Quirrell, wand raised. I knew you were faking unconsciousness. Your accident was too convenient. Merely a necessary deception to follow you past the protections, Quirrell replied with a cold smile. And now the boy has retrieved the stone for us. How helpful of him. Us? Harry repeated, dread pooling in his stomach. Quirrell's smile widened. My master is always with me, Potter. Would you like to meet him? He's been most eager to see you again. Before either Harry or Snape could react, Quirrell snapped his fingers, causing fiery ropes to bind Snape tightly. The potion's master fell to the ground with a grunt of pain as Quirrell turned his attention to Harry. Now, Potter, give me the stone. I don't have it, Harry lied, backing away. Quirrell laughed. Don't bother lying. I saw you take it from the mirror. My master showed me how it worked, he shows me many things. Your master? Harry asked, stalling for time as he tried to edge toward the exit. The Dark Lord, of course, Quirrell replied. So much more than the pathetic creature you encountered in the forest. When I met him during my travels, he showed me how foolish I'd been with my petty pursuit of good and evil. There is only power, Potter, and those too weak to seek it. A high, cold voice suddenly filled the chamber, seeming to come from Quirrell himself. Let me speak to him, face to face. Master, you are not strong enough. Quirrell protested. I have strength enough, for this. To Harry's horror, Quirrell began unwrapping his turban. As the cloth fell away, he turned to reveal a terrible face on the back of his head, chalk-white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. Harry Potter, the face whispered. See what I have become. Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body. But once I have the elixir of life, I can create a body of my own. Voldemort. The creature that had murdered Harry's parents was now staring at him from the back of Quirrell's head, its red eyes gleaming with malice. Why kill them? Harry asked, finding courage in his anger. My parents, why did you target them specifically? Voldemort's lipless mouth curved in a terrible smile. They were in my way, as you are now. But unlike them, you have a choice. Give me the stone, and I might spare you. Your mother died to protect you, don't let it be in vain. Don't listen to him, Potter. Snape shouted from the floor, still struggling against his bonds. He killed your parents without mercy, he'll kill you the moment he has the stone. Voldemort's eyes flicked to Snape with hatred. Ah, my slippery friend. Always the double agent, aren't you? But your true loyalty was revealed when you tried to save the boy's life during that Quidditch match. My loyalty is to Lily's memory, Snape snarled, confirming Harry's suspicion about his connection to Harry's mother. Something you could never understand. Enough. Voldemort hissed. Quirrell, take the stone from the boy. Quirrell lunged forward, but Harry was faster, darting to the side and making a break for the door. Before he could reach it, Quirrell's hand closed around his wrist. Immediately, needle-sharp pain seared through Harry's scar, but something else happened too. Quirrell howled in agony, releasing Harry and staring at his blistering fingers. My hands, he screamed. Master, my hands. Then kill him, fool. Voldemort shrieked. Quirrell raised his wand, but Harry, acting on instinct, surged forward and pressed his hands against the professor's face. Quirrell screamed as his skin burned and blistered at Harry's touch. The same protection that had saved Harry as a baby was now burning Voldemort's servant. Despite the excruciating pain in his scar, Harry clung to Quirrell, preventing him from casting a spell or escaping. The defense professor's face began to blister and crumble beneath Harry's palms as Voldemort screamed for Quirrell to fight through the pain. Through his agony, Harry became aware of two significant events happening simultaneously. First, golden threads of magic, visible only to him through his Ravenclaw inheritance, began emanating from his body, connecting to the ancient stones of Hogwarts itself. The castle was responding to his distress, channeling power into him as an heir of its founders. Second, the philosopher's stone in his pocket began to heat intensely, somehow resonating with the protection in Harry's blood. He felt a surge of magical energy, not just his own, but something deeper and more ancient, connected to his Flammel inheritance. What's happening? Voldemort screamed as golden light began to envelop Harry and Quirrell. What magic is this? Harry didn't answer, couldn't answer through the pain. But somewhere in his mind, he understood, the stone was recognizing him as Flammel's magical heir, amplifying the blood protection his mother had given him. Quirrell gave one last terrible shriek as his body began to disintegrate beneath Harry's touch. In the final moment before losing consciousness, Harry saw Voldemort's wraith tear itself free from the crumbling body, a spectral snake-like form that screamed in fury before fleeing through the walls. Then darkness claimed him. He's waking up, a familiar voice said nearby. Harry? Can you hear me? Harry blinked slowly, the world gradually coming into focus. He was lying in a bed in the hospital wing, surrounded by what appeared to be half a sweet shop. Piles of candy and cards covered the bedside table. Hermione and Ron stood anxiously beside him, Ron sporting a bandage around his head. What happened? Harry croaked, his throat painfully dry. You've been unconscious for 3 days, Hermione explained, helping him sip water. After you fainted in the chamber with the mirror, Professor Snape carried you out. He was in terrible shape himself, those magical ropes left serious burns, but he refused treatment until you were safe. Snape saved me? Harry asked incredulously. Ron nodded, looking equally bewildered by this turn of events. Hard to believe, isn't it? Dumbledore says he's been protecting you all year because of some debt to your father, though Snape denies that part vehemently. Harry suspected the truth was more complicated, likely connected to his mother rather than his father, given Voldemort's taunts about Snape's loyalty to Lily's memory. "And the stone?" he asked. "Destroyed," came Dumbledore's voice as the headmaster entered the hospital wing. "Nicholas and I had a little chat and agreed it was for the best." Harry studied the old wizard carefully, noting the calculated twinkle in those blue eyes. Their last private interaction had been the tense meeting in Dumbledore's office, before the Gringotts audit notification, before Harry's confrontation with Voldemort, before everything. "But won't Flamel die without the stone?" Harry asked. "He has enough elixir stored to set his affairs in order," Dumbledore replied serenely. "But yes, eventually he will die. To one as young as you, I'm sure it seems incredible, but to Nicholas, it's rather like going to bed after a very, very long day." Something in Dumbledore's tone suggested he knew about Harry's Flamel inheritance, though how he could have discovered this was unclear. Had the stone revealed it somehow during Harry's confrontation with Quirrell? "Perhaps," Dumbledore continued, his gaze intensifying, "we might have a private word, Harry. I believe your friends can return after dinner." Though clearly reluctant, Ron and Hermione departed after promising to return later. Once they were alone, Dumbledore settled into the chair beside Harry's bed, his expression growing serious. "What happened in the chamber with Quirrell was extraordinary, Harry. Few grown wizards could have survived such an encounter, yet you prevailed through a combination of your mother's protection and something else. Something connected to the stone itself." It wasn't a question, but Harry recognized the invitation to explain. Should he reveal his knowledge of the Flamel inheritance? Or maintain the facade of ignorance a little longer? Before he could decide, Dumbledore continued, "Nicholas contacted me most urgently after the incident. It seems the stone responded to you in a manner he'd seen only once before, when his own daughter held it centuries ago. He was quite insistent on speaking with you personally once you recover." So Flamel knew. That simplified matters somewhat. "I'd like that," Harry said carefully. "I have questions about my family's connection to his." "As I suspected," Dumbledore nodded. "Your recent communications with Gringotts suggested you might have discovered more about your heritage than I had anticipated." Harry stiffened. "You've been monitoring my mail?" "Not reading it," Dumbledore clarified, though the distinction seemed meaningless to Harry. "Merely noting its frequency and origin. The Goblin Nation has taken an unusual interest in you these past months." "With good reason," Harry replied, deciding direct confrontation was now inevitable. "They discovered unauthorized withdrawals from my vaults totaling over 2 million galleons." "Withdrawals you made, Professor?" Dumbledore didn't deny the accusation. Instead, he sighed heavily, suddenly looking every year of his considerable age. "I wondered when we would have this conversation. I had hoped to explain the necessity of those actions when you were older, better able to understand the complexities involved." "I understand theft perfectly well," Harry said coldly. "It wasn't theft, Harry," Dumbledore insisted. "Every galleon was used for your protection, directly or indirectly." "Protection?" Harry repeated incredulously. "While I slept in a cupboard and wore my cousin's cast-offs. While the Dursleys told everyone I was a burden even as you paid them handsomely to keep me. The blood protection required financial support," Dumbledore explained. "Your aunt and uncle would never have kept you without compensation, you've experienced their distaste for magic firsthand. And the wider protective networks I established, safe houses throughout Britain, monitoring charms to detect dark magic near your location, a network of Order members keeping watch, all required significant resources. Resources you took without authorization," Harry pointed out. "Against my parents' explicit wishes in their will." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've seen the will, then. That explains much about the timing of the Gringotts audit. Why did you seal it?" Harry demanded. "Why ignore their instructions regarding my guardianship?" Because Sirius Black had betrayed them to Voldemort, the Longbottoms were attacked into insanity days later, and neither Minerva nor Amelia had the blood connection necessary for your mother's protection, Dumbledore replied bluntly. "I made the only choice that would keep you alive, Harry. The blood wards at Privet Drive have prevented a dozen attempted attacks over the years, attacks you never knew about because the wards neutralized the threats. Harry absorbed this information with growing conflict. If Dumbledore was telling the truth about attempted attacks, perhaps some of the withdrawals had indeed been for legitimate protection. But that didn't explain or justify the sheer magnitude of the theft. 2 million galleons is excessive for protection, he said finally. And you should have told me about my inheritance when I returned to the wizarding world, not hidden it from me. Perhaps, Dumbledore acknowledged. But would an 11-year-old Harry, raised in ignorance of magic, have been prepared to handle not just wealth but the political implications of your various inherited titles? Would you have been ready to face the machinations of those who would seek to control or manipulate you for their own purposes? The irony of this statement, coming from someone who had themselves manipulated Harry extensively, was not lost on either of them. That wasn't your decision to make, Harry insisted. It was my inheritance, my birthright. Yes, Dumbledore agreed softly, it was. Is. And now you've claimed it, somewhat earlier than I anticipated. The question becomes, what will you do with it? Harry recognized the underlying concern in Dumbledore's question. The headmaster feared Harry might use his newfound power and wealth for vengeance, perhaps even against Dumbledore himself. I'll use it responsibly, Harry said after a moment. Starting with recovering what was taken without permission. The Gringotts audit has already frozen much of my personal assets, Dumbledore confirmed. I've authorized the return of all recoverable funds to your vaults, along with detailed accounting of how the remainder was spent. You'll find most went to Order of the Phoenix Operations, the organization your parents belonged to that fought against Voldemort. And continues to fight, given tonight's events, Harry guessed. Dumbledore nodded gravely. Voldemort is not truly gone. He will find other ways to return, other servants to help him. The protection your mother provided will continue to shield you until you come of age, but beyond that. He trailed off, clearly reluctant to burden Harry with more difficult truths. But Harry had had enough of secrets and manipulations. Tell me everything, he insisted. About Voldemort, about why he targeted my family specifically, about this connection between us that makes my scar hurt. No more half-truths or manipulations. For a long moment, Dumbledore seemed to weigh his options. Then, with evident reluctance, he began to explain about a prophecy made before Harry's birth, a prophecy that had marked him as the one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord. This is why he came to Godric's Hollow that night, Dumbledore concluded. Why he tried to kill you specifically. He believed he was eliminating the only threat to his power, but instead, he transferred some of his own abilities to you when the killing curse rebounded. That's why I can speak to snakes, Harry realized, recalling an incident at the zoo before his Hogwarts letter. Why I feel his emotions sometimes. Dumbledore looked troubled. You've experienced his emotions? Through your scar. Harry nodded. When he's nearby, or feeling something particularly strongly. It's painful. A connection I had not anticipated, Dumbledore mused. This may require additional precautions. Perhaps a clemency training. I've already begun meditation exercises, Harry volunteered, not mentioning that these were primarily aimed at controlling his inherited magical abilities rather than blocking mental intrusion. Dumbledore looked impressed. Most enterprising of you. Though formal instruction would still be beneficial when you're somewhat older. They lapsed into silence, both contemplating the implications of their conversation. Finally, Harry addressed the question that had been troubling him since reading Bloodfang's letter. The Wizengamot seats connected to my inherited houses, he said. I'll need a proxy to vote them until I'm of age. Someone I can trust completely. Dumbledore nodded. A significant responsibility. The combined voting power of those seats would make your proxy one of the most influential voices in wizarding government. Would you be willing to serve in that capacity? Harry asked, watching Dumbledore's reaction carefully. Despite our disagreements about my financial matters. Surprise flickered across the headmaster's features before his expression turned cautious. May I ask why you would consider me, given the circumstances? Because I need someone who understands the political landscape and shares my opposition to Voldemort, Harry explained. Someone who won't be corrupted by the power those votes represent. Our personal issues aside, you're the logical choice, unless you prefer I ask the Malfoys. The last comment was deliberately provocative, and Dumbledore's eyes narrowed slightly before he smiled. A most Slytherin proposal, Harry. I accept, under two conditions. First, that major voting decisions be discussed between us rather than left to my sole discretion, and second, that this arrangement be reviewed annually to ensure it continues to serve your best interests. Agreed, Harry said, offering his hand. With one additional condition of my own, complete transparency regarding my family's assets and history going forward. No more secrets. Dumbledore hesitated before clasping Harry's hand. Within reason. Some knowledge remains dangerous at your current age, but I will no longer conceal matters that directly concern your heritage or safety. As they shook hands, Harry felt the castle's magic stir around them, the golden threads of his Ravenclaw inheritance briefly visible as Hogwarts itself seemed to witness their agreement. One last question, Harry said as Dumbledore rose to leave. Did you know I would be able to get the stone from the mirror? Was that why you let me keep the invisibility cloak, knowing I'd eventually find my way to the third-floor corridor? Dumbledore's smile turned enigmatic. Let's just say I had a strong suspicion about what might happen when the heir of both Potter and Flamel bloodlines encountered the stone. Though I confess, the particular manner of Quirrell's defeat was beyond even my calculations. With that admission of both manipulation and its limits, Dumbledore departed, leaving Harry to contemplate the complex figure who had been both his greatest betrayer and, possibly, his most important ally. The end-of-year feast found Harry surrounded by friends in a great hall decorated in Slytherin green and silver. Despite their adventures and Quidditch success, Gryffindor had been unable to overcome the massive point loss from their nighttime expedition to smuggle Norbert away. Doesn't seem fair, Ron grumbled, eyeing the Slytherin table where Malfoy looked insufferably smug. We saved the whole school from you-know-who, and they get the house cup for being a bunch of gits. Language, Ronald, Hermione scolded, though she looked equally disappointed. Harry, however, found he didn't much care about the house cup anymore. After facing Voldemort, nearly dying, and negotiating a complex political arrangement with Dumbledore, school accolades seemed rather trivial. His perspective wasn't shared by the rest of the school, however, which collectively held its breath as Dumbledore rose to officially award the house cup to Slytherin. But the headmaster had a surprise in store. Yes, well done, Slytherin, he began. However, recent events must be taken into account. The room went very still as Dumbledore awarded last-minute points, 50 to Ron 4, the best-played game of chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, 50 to Hermione 4, cool use of logic in the face of fire, 60 to Harry 4, pure nerve and outstanding courage, and finally, 10 to Neville 4, the courage to stand up to our friends. With these additions, Gryffindor overtook Slytherin by exactly 1 point, sending the Great Hall into chaos as the decorations changed from green and silver to scarlet and gold. While his housemates celebrated wildly, Harry caught Dumbledore's eye across the hall. The headmaster raised his goblet slightly in acknowledgement, a gesture that somehow conveyed both apology and challenge. Their arrangement would be complicated, Harry knew. Dumbledore would remain manipulative by nature, and Harry would continue to question the headmaster's methods and motivations. But they had reached an understanding based on mutual respect and necessity, a foundation that might, in time, develop into genuine trust. As the feast concluded and students began preparing for their journey home, Harry found himself cornered by Draco Malfoy in the entrance hall. "Enjoyed your moment of glory, Potter?" Malfoy sneered, though there was something calculating rather than merely petulant in his expression. Special treatment from Dumbledore again. Some things never change. Was there something you wanted, Malfoy? Harry asked wearily. Or are you just being unpleasant as usual? Malfoy glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard before lowering his voice. My father says interesting things are happening at Gringotts. Audit proceedings against a high-ranking wizard that have the goblins practically salivating. He seems to think you might be involved. Harry kept his expression neutral. Your father seems remarkably well informed about private bank matters. He has connections, Malfoy shrugged. Just like he has connections throughout the ministry, the Wisengamot, the school governors. Connections that might be useful to someone in your position. The implication was clear. Lucius Malfoy was extending a political overture through his son, testing Harry's potential receptiveness to an alliance. I appreciate the information, Harry replied carefully. But I've already made arrangements regarding my affairs. Disappointment flickered across Malfoy's face before his sneer returned. With Dumbledore, I suppose. The same man who, he caught himself. Never mind. You'll learn eventually what a mistake that is. As Malfoy stalked away, Harry considered the exchange. The Malfoys clearly knew about the audit against Dumbledore and had hoped to exploit the situation to bring Harry into their sphere of influence. Their knowledge of his position, presumably his inherited titles and wealth, suggested the information was spreading through certain circles of wizarding society. The coming year would bring new challenges beyond simply evading Voldemort's next attempt to return. Harry would need to navigate the political landscape of the wizarding world while continuing to develop his unusual magical abilities and maintaining his academic facade at Hogwarts. But unlike the frightened, ignorant boy who had entered Gringotts on his 11th birthday, he now had resources, allies, and knowledge. Whatever trials lay ahead, Harry Potter would face them not as a pawn in someone else's game, but as a player with his own strategy. The Hogwarts Express journey back to London passed pleasantly, with Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville sharing a compartment. As the countryside flew past outside the windows, conversation turned to their summer plans. You must come and stay this summer, Ron insisted. All of you, I'll send an owl. Thanks, Harry smiled. I'll need something to look forward to. In truth, his summer would be far busier than his friends realized. Bloodfang had arranged a series of meetings with his various vault managers, magical tutors for his inherited abilities, and, most intriguingly, Nicholas Flamel himself, who had requested a private audience with his young, oath-bound heir. There was also the matter of the Dursleys. While Harry still needed to return to Privet Drive to maintain the blood protection, his emancipation in financial matters gave him significant leverage. A careful explanation of how their compensation for his care had been discovered, and might be investigated by Muggle authorities for tax fraud, should ensure a more comfortable summer arrangement. As they approached London, Hermione raised a topic that had clearly been bothering her. Harry, what Dumbledore said about you-know-who trying to come back, do you think he'll try again? Yes, Harry replied without hesitation. I don't think he'll ever stop trying until he either succeeds or is destroyed completely. But we'll be ready for him, right? Ron asked, his expression determined despite the fear in his eyes. Harry thought about everything that had happened since discovering his inheritance, the knowledge he'd gained, the allies he'd made, the power he'd begun to access. He thought about Dumbledore, simultaneously adversary and ally, manipulator and mentor. About Snape, whose complicated loyalty to his mother had saved Harry's life. About his friends, who had risked everything to stand with him against darkness. We'll be ready, he promised. All of us together. As the train pulled into King's Cross Station and they prepared to disembark, Harry felt the weight of the time-turner against his chest, hidden beneath his shirt. The small hourglass represented everything he had learned this year, that time revealed truth, that the past shaped the present but didn't control the future, and that some gifts came from unexpected sources. Whatever Voldemort planned, whatever schemes Dumbledore had not yet revealed, whatever challenges his complex inheritance would bring, Harry Potter was no longer the boy who had once been forced to sleep in a cupboard under the stairs. He was the heir to 15 ancient houses, with the magic of Hogwarts founders flowing through his veins and allies both seen and unseen supporting his path. The true test of that inheritance, not just its wealth and political power, but its responsibilities and purpose, still lay ahead. But for the first time in his life, Harry felt truly prepared to face it. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.